We had 2 agents die today. Clay probably won't survive the night.
Not now, man.
My problem
Please.
with you, you're reckless. These men trusted you to lead them as a team. Where were you?
I knew those men better than you did.
Oh, I see. But that makes it all right.
No, it doesn't make it all right. But I stopped that thing, didn't I?
Yes, you did. That's what you do. That's why we need you. You have an insight. You know monsters.
What are you trying to say?
This whole thing is a farce. Because in the end, after you've captured every freak out there, there's still one left. You.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. We are your hosts. I'm Jordan, and they're whispering his name through this disappearing land, but hidden in his coat is a red right hand. It's Kumar.
That's me. That song was also used, I think, in every Scream movie.
Really?
I think so, except for maybe one of them.
Huh. That's, of course, Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds.
Yeah. This week we're talking about Hellboy from 2004.
Yes.
Pause the podcast.
I didn't even think about this as usual.
I think...
Yeah, this movie rules. Go watch it.
Yes. Are there spoilers? Are there really spoilers? No. I think you can listen to this episode and then watch the movie, but I might be confused from having seen it 3 times.
Only 3 times. Well,
this might have been my 4th.
Okay.
This week. Yeah.
There are things happen in this movie.
Yeah.
But I think you can probably listen to the podcast.
Okay.
We'll go with that. I'll come on the side of that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so it was based on a comic book series by Mike Mignola, which kind of started around 93, 94.
Yeah.
It started with some guest spots here and there and little short stories, and then he came out with a series of 4 issues called Seed of Destruction, Hellboy Seed of Destruction.
It's a primary inspiration for this film.
Yes.
The main inspiration.
Yes, and I did notice when I was flipping through my books, I flipped through Wake the Devil, which is I think the 2nd or 3rd one, and there's a lot of scenes from the movie are based on stuff in Wake the Devil.
Great.
Which is like a direct sequel to Seed of Destruction, but we'll talk about that a little bit. So Mike Mignola had been drawing superhero comics like through the 80s, probably started in the 70s. So he came up as kind of a superhero guy, but as the 80s...
He did Cosmic Odyssey, the famous one with Batman on the phone.
Yeah, so Cosmic Odyssey was... Well, it's good you brought that up, because Cosmic Odyssey was all of the Jack Kirby Fourth World characters, like Darkseid, and Orion, and Big Barda, and all those dudes, and it was one of those big... It was this deluxe, 4-issue thing that happened from DC. But even at the time, through the 80s and 90s, his art style was becoming more and more idiosyncratic.
Right.
It's hard to describe. He had a very angular style of simplified, abstract in some way.
His art is amazing. It
is, not like in a Bill Sienkiewicz scratchy wildness. It was very controlled.
It's craggy.
Yeah, craggy's a good word for it. He did not
lots of primary colors.
It was like you were constantly worried that he was going to stop getting work. They were going to stop hiring him because it was getting so... it was so unique.
Yeah.
And unlike any other comics that were coming out at any time that he was working, and as he went further on, he was like, I'm going to draw more my way. And it was like more and more. And but there was still underpinning, and Cosmic Odyssey is the greatest example of that, because there was still very much a Jack Kirby. Like, he could draw stylistically in the sense of dudes with their legs 6 feet apart and walloping some bad guy or something. He could go for that Jack Kirby stuff, but he went for much smaller panels than Jack Kirby would have. So he did that for a long time, and then he went away, did some... I don't know if he went away, but he ended up doing some design work on Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, and the comic adaptation of that.
And he did do the comic adaptation of it, which we talked about.
We did review that on Deconstructing Comics.
Yeah. And then there was kind of a shift. I don't know if he discovered himself or something while he was working on Dracula, but pretty soon after that, he started this series, Hellboy, for Dark Horse. under their Legend line. Now, the Legend line was like a lot of unique creators, kind of all under one roof. So Sin City came out from the Legend line. John Byrne had a series out, and there were a few other creators. I can't remember them all, but it was all like, here's a place where you can do your own thing.
Yeah.
And all the other superheroes stuff, we never saw it again. It was like he found his home.
Yep. Yes.
It seemed like it was what he wanted to do all along, or the way his career had been heading, or he just seemed to be completely in the zone when he got to Hellboy. It's like, why wasn't he doing this from day one? Maybe he needs to work up to this point. Because suddenly he got to the super craggy style, but every panel would be half black, like covered in black shadows. It was just pools of black.
Yeah.
You'd see very little of, not very little, but I'd say 30% of a panel would be blacked out.
Yeah, and then the other 30% will be a primary color, like blue,
Yes.
or red, or yellow.
Yes.
Perhaps not a primary, bit of shade off the primary, and then sort of strange, angular, blocky
Yes.
figures, half in shadow.
And the other thing he would do
Amazing.
now, which he never did before, as far as I can tell, there was one issue of Batman that he did that was really close to this style, and it was another like aha moment, I think. But he will sometimes have panels that are just of like something in the background. It'll be a spooky bit of statuary,
Yes.
or
Yep.
some animal in the bushes or something. But it's not even, you don't even get the whole thing. You just get a corner of it, and you might not even get dialogue or in there, or
Nothing.
anything.
Usually, it'll just be a panel of.
You got the face of a statue,
flying
a crumbling
buttress.
statue, yeah, or something like that.
Yeah.
He actually wrote
Love
some
it.
issues of Conan. Within the last 10, 15 years, and you can see it's the same thing. He's a different artist. He wrote them, but sometimes you get a cutaway and you'll just see a bunch of frogs watching Conan from in the background somewhere.
It's so good.
It's just like one silent
He'll
panel.
often cut away to like an animal watching the
Yeah.
characters, or a statue watching them, or another thing he does is there'll be a panel of just someone's eye.
Yes.
Maybe someone often that's speaking to the characters. It'll be sort of the upper quadrant of their face.
Yeah.
It's really arresting.
Yeah.
And fantastic. Like, really, like it's so recognizable, inimitable. Like, you absolutely know when you're looking at a Mignola comic. There's nothing else like it.
And even that Conan comic which he didn't draw, when you see those panels of the silent panels of the frogs, you're like, oh, this is...
I know who wrote this.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing about cropping, because I spoke to Stephen Bissett about this once, not for this show, for the other show when I interviewed him. I said, well, how do you do horror in comics? Because this is a horror comic. How do you do horror when you don't have sound or motion? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, he mentioned a lot of it's about the way you crop your panels and what you don't show. And you also hear Guillermo del Toro in interviews saying horror is when something is there which shouldn't be there, or something which is not there which should be there.
Okay.
And
there's a lot of that going on.
There's a lot of that going on, and the way you just crop a panel, and you're like, what's out? Why are we looking at this? The face, the corner of the face of the statue.
Yeah. Why do we have this pitiless gaze of a frog?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. So, Seed of Destruction comes out in 1993 and 1994. I was buying the issues as they came out. They were scripted by John Byrne. I think at the time, Mignola did not feel confident about his own writing skills. He hadn't really written anything.
That explains why it feels so different.
It is very different. And in fact, there's some clumsiness in the cartooning in Seed of Destruction. Like, for example, this is jumping way ahead, when Hellboy comes to his father, Professor Broom, and suddenly he's been away on an expedition. He was knocked out for like 10 days. He doesn't know what happened, but he called Hellboy when he returned home. He was presumed dead. And then suddenly there are frogs in his office. And he's like, run away, Hellboy. And he runs out through a door, and then suddenly his body is thrown back into the room. Now, we don't know what's outside that door. We don't know where he went, what happened to him on that side. We don't even really understand. We get a shot of the brownstone that he's living in or whatever, this building, but we don't know what this building is, or is it his house? If it is, how did he end up here when he just got off this boat from, there's a lot of like plot stuff that's like
it comes up later on in the comic.
Yeah.
It's meant to be a mystery, I suppose, but I agree, especially when he vanishes through that doorway and then boom, his body immediately is thrown back through, and he's quite dead.
Like, was he outside his house, or what? Is that a hallway? You don't know what's through there, because he just has a black portal, the way...
And he comes back all covered in marks.
Yeah.
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 And he's quite clearly... Not only is he's disfigured. So something happened in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
It's a bit odd.
But it's a bit like, what happened where? My question is, did he run... Is that the front door of his house that he ran out, or is that a hallway, or is that another bathroom or something? Like, what is that? So there's that kind of little... There are little moments that are a bit like that. Another thing was, I found... So, Hellboy gives these kind of one-liners.
Yes.
They're very terse.
Yes.
In Seed of Destruction. They're like 1 or 2 words.
Yeah.
They're like, no chance, or something like that. You know, when he's fighting some giant monster or something like that. And I always felt watching this movie, which, as I mentioned before, I've seen 4 times. Previous 3 times, I was like, this Hellboy is... The Ron Perlman Hellboy is quite talkative, and he's not in the... And in the comic, maybe it's just because of the way Mignola draws him so stony, you imagine him saying it in a stony way with little emotion. But actually, when I reread Wake the Devil, which is the second volume, which was scripted by Mignola, not John Byrne, he sounds a lot like the Ron Perlman version.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot more. He gives some of those funny lines about his looks and stuff like that to Liz. Like, some of that is more like the way Mignola himself wrote the character than when John Byrne was helping him with the scripting.
That's interesting, because I have a different impression, but we'll get into that. I have more like what you initially said, that Hellboy is a lot more laconic in the comics, I think.
Yeah.
Definitely in Seed of Destruction, but I think generally in the comics, he's played a lot older, a lot more world-weary.
Yes, he's been around, he's been doing the job for 60 years, 50 years, because this came out in 94. And, but the other thing is, there's first-person narration from Hellboy throughout Seed of Destruction.
That's the only thing...
So what he says to the monster is, screw you, pow, punches him, but we get lots of...
Internal monologue,
which is very erudite, and...
It's very kind of noir, almost.
Yes. I thought of that too, yeah. It is like a noir detective kind of thing.
This is the only Hellboy comic where we get Hellboy's inner narrative, and it's copious, as you said. Pages full of his inner thoughts, where he thinks about being a paranormal investigator. Uses that term over and over. And I don't really like it.
No, I didn't. It actually reminded me of the Blade Runner voiceover. Speaking of noir
that's
voiceovers.
That's an unfavorable comparison.
Yeah, but I don't know if... I think part of my problem was... I think this was... I'm going to guess it was John Byrne's suggestion. Let's put in these captions to...
Yeah. We need to understand what's going on in this crazy world.
All our information about the other paranormal investigators, Liz Sherman and Abe, she's a pyrotechnic. He's a kind of fish creature, like the creature from the Black Lagoon sort of type.
Yes.
All of that is given to us from Hellboy's narration. He says, here's the information in Liz's dossier. Yeah. Here's why Abe's name is Abe. He was found. You know, all this kind of stuff comes from him. We don't get scenes of them. We don't get their background through it. But the thing that was kind of like, there's a line there where he says, they come to this haunted mansion kind of place, and Hellboy's narration says, they say this place is cursed if you believe in that sort of thing.
Why would you say that?
As if curses are rare.
Yeah.
But then later on, we get narration, and there's narration about all the investigating. He says, I'm the best paranormal investigator on the planet. And I'm like, well, then you know that curses are real.
Literally a demon man.
Yes.
So you're right. I actually wrote that line where he talks about this building is supposedly cursed. And it's like, now you may think curses are eyewash.
Right.
But you haven't seen what I've seen in my 50 years of paranormal investigation. It's like, that's a line that a regular guy would utter. Mm. But Hellboy is a 6-foot-tall red demon man.
There's some, if
you're talking to him, you already know magic is real.
Yes. Well, here's some other inconsistencies. I have to put this one at Mignola's feet because I'm assuming he plotted the thing. They go to this mansion. Hellboy is there. He's a big red demon-looking guy with this giant stone hand with like some bolt-looking things on it and stuff. Yeah. And he's got a big tail, all that kind of stuff. And he's there with Abe, as I mentioned, who is a fish creature. Yep. Abe's in disguise. And I'm like, why is Abe in disguise as a human? He's disguised as a human, as a normal human. And Hellboy is talking to this old lady, and I'm like, why? Hellboy is talking, and she calls him Mr. Boy. And she has no issue with this hell demon walking around in her house. Yeah.
Hellboy in the comics is out.
Yeah.
Like, people know of Hellboy.
It seems to be, because she's not
It's
freaked out.
great, but
She's
you're
not
right.
freaked out, but I guess
Which
we're
I
in a
think
world
is-
where people don't believe in curses at the same time.
Yeah, silly.
I'm
This
not
is what
sure.
we'll file it under early installment. This is
Yes.
the first comic.
Yeah.
And actually, when I read the comics, I read a whole bunch of the later ones, like Wake the Devil and all the later ones first, and then went back to Seed of Destruction.
Okay.
And reading it, I was thinking, oh, this is really rough around the edges.
It's like when you've been watching a sitcom for a long time, and the reruns cycle back to the pilot,
Yep.
and you're like, what is this?
Or when you watch the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Now, it occurs to me that we haven't really talked much about Hellboy, what the comic's actually about.
Yeah, we'll get there, yeah. We'll do that. We can do that now.
Let's do that now. So Hellboy, as we said, is a 6-foot-tall red demon with cloven hooves, a tail,
Yes.
and an enormous stone hand.
Yeah. Normally he wears a trench coat, but
Yes.
not always, which Mignola said it took him a while to figure out that he looked better with the trench coat on.
Yeah. He works for an organization called the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense.
Yeah.
And he's sort of an agent at large.
Yeah.
He runs around and he solves paranormal situations. He was summoned to Earth in mysterious circumstances by a Nazi ritual.
Yeah. So this is 1944.
Yes.
So the opening of the comic, we get the ritual in 1944. It's actually in two locations. There's a team of 3 paranormal British investigators
Yep.
that are like something bad's going to happen. Like there's 2 sites. There's one here in England and there's another one in Scotland.
Yes.
And this ritual's happening over there, but Hellboy appears at this location in England.
Yes, that's it. Well, they're somewhere off the coast of England, on some island, with a church. And they're there, but it's the wrong spot. They're there with a whole platoon of American GIs and an American superhero that we meet briefly.
Yeah, Torch of
Called
Liberty.
Torch of Liberty, which I think who's just there to kind of establish the kind of pulpy setting.
Maybe it's so weird.
I feel like it's
I wonder
very-
if he ever came back to it.
I've never seen Torch of Liberty in any other Hellboy comic.
Right. Okay.
I've read a lot of them.
Yeah.
He never comes back. I think he's just there so that we get a sense of the world. One of the things I love about Hellboy, I really love Hellboy, incidentally.
Oh, yeah.
I love the Hellboy comics so much. I love the pulp 1930s and 40s feel of it. I love how mixed up everything is. There's magic, there's super tech,
Yeah.
there's magic tech.
Yes.
There's, like, sort of like private investigators running around with guns.
Yeah, heads in jars.
Heads in
Talking
jars.
heads in jars.
You've got someone like the Torch of Liberty who's, there were a lot of, he's like a Captain America kind of guy.
Yeah.
So he's an American superhero that fights Nazis. So
Yeah.
he's very much in the Captain America mold
Yeah.
of those kind of original comics. Not so pre-Jack Kirby, I would say.
Well, Captain America was created by Jack.
I mean, I'm talking about sort of the archetype. There was a bunch of those Nazi fighting heroes
yes.
running around in comics in the 30s and 40s.
Yes. What was Captain America not the first? But actually, I think this is the thing I love about this is Jack Kirby's The Thing from Fantastic Four running around in a horror comic is what this is. That's the thing I love about it, and it's interesting to me because Hellboy he's most of the time he's running around. It's fisticuffs against giant monsters. It's absolutely Mignola trying to draw Jack Kirby comics.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
And that's what. But what the other side of that? Maybe I'm jumping too far ahead again. Is that there's actually not enough material in this comic for a movie because basically,
Sure.
Professor Broom. By the way, his name is spelled Worcestershire sauce, and it's actually pronounced Broom. Yeah. So, anyway,
it's spelled like Brutenholm.
Brutenholm, yeah. So this is a weird.
It's just pronounced Broom.
It's pronounced Broom, which we're told in there. It's a weird little detail, but he's dead. So there's these frogs, and he'd been on the expedition. So they go to that house of the lady who's like the matron of the family that went on the expedition, and there's 4 issues are just fisticuffs in the house. Yeah. There's actually not enough there for a 2-hour movie.
Sure. Of course.
Interesting. But anyway, okay, so he's summoned. So the Nazi ritual happens. It's performed by Rasputin, who's still alive.
It's so
great.
good.
It's so great. And
it's very there's real Lovecraftian vibe too. So
yes.
Another influence from.
Yeah, you better ring the bell for that.
Oh, yeah. There's another influence from the 30s, there.
Absolutely.
We have this Lovecraftian feel. Unknowable monsters, things coming through portals.
Yes.
Mad sorcerers.
Now, you had some sort of... We've had a conversation before about Hitler's interest in the occult.
He absolutely was very interested in the occult.
Okay.
Hitler was, to a limited degree, but there were people high up in the Nazi hierarchy who were very interested in the occult, especially Heinrich Himmler.
Oh, okay.
Who in the comic is the one that contacts Rasputin when he's living in exile in Italy.
Okay, right.
Now, the film mentions... We're jumping ahead here.
Yeah.
I forget if this is mentioned in the comics or not, but the film mentions the Thule Society.
Yes.
Which we would pronounce Thule Society. It is, of course, the same Thule where Prince Valiant is from.
Oh, right.
The mysterious island off the coast of Scandinavia.
Okay.
Which is the uttermost edge of the map.
Okay.
For the Nazis, for 1920s and 1930s German occultists, it was the Atlantis equivalent.
Okay, gotcha.
And the Thule Society was a real thing, top-ranking. Rudolf Hess and Heinrich Himmler definitely belonged to it. There's no evidence, despite many people trying to link him to it, that Hitler himself ever visited it.
Okay.
But yes, you definitely have interest in the occult among high-ranking Nazis.
Yes. Okay, and it's Rasputin, it's hilarious it's Rasputin there. And you're just the whole time you're like, all this stuff's being thrown at you. And very few panels with narration coming from, I think, the general or whoever's in command of the American.
Who has a monocle with a swastika on it.
Oh, yeah, that's the
oh, no, that's the Nazi one, yeah.
So the ritual happens, and it seems to have failed in the Scottish location because nothing appears there. But Rasputin's like, I know something has happened, whatever. But actually, this little baby version of Hellboy has appeared in the British...
Yeah, where the British are all there thinking something was going to happen.
Yeah.
And they missed the Nazis who are all the way on another island.
Yeah.
And they did a ritual where Rasputin is wearing these two funky techno goggles. Mike Mignola...
Gloves, yeah, these huge gloves.
Sorry, not goggles, yeah, gloves. Although, one thing, Mignola loves to draw big chunky hand things on the end of arms.
Yeah.
So many of his characters
But it's hard not to draw a connection, especially in the movie where he only has the one on the right hand, and you're like, oh.
We can talk about that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. No spoilers, but it's clearly a technological version of Hellboy's right hand.
Yeah.
Yes, that's blindly obvious. I mean, anyone watching it.
But Mignola puts them on both hands anyway, whatever.
Well, it was... we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
But it was one of those art from adversity or a felicitous kind of thing that occurred because they figured out early in production when they were filming that scene that it would be way cheaper if they just built one...
Of course.
Of these gloves. And then once they were running those numbers, they realised it's way better in terms of symbolism because it looks like a technological version of Hellboy's hand.
So Hellboy is kind of adopted by the American crew and Professor Broom, and there's actually 3. We don't know what's happened to those other 2 investigators in the comic. I don't know if they come back
disappeared from the scene. I think they're probably in other ones. There's a hell of a lot of Hellboy comics.
Yeah, so then we learn, again, it's a little bit awkward the way this is presented, that Professor Broom had gone away on this expedition to the Arctic.
With the Cavendish family.
With the Cavendish family, was presumed dead, but then re-emerged back in New York, where he's living. I guess he goes back to his own house. He calls Hellboy. Hellboy shows up. This is all in one panel. Basically, Hellboy has come back, and he says, you called me, but then there are frogs there. Broom is attacked. Broom is killed by... This is like page 5 of the comic. Professor Broom is dead. Hellboy fight... So the frog turns into a giant frog monster, or at least one of the frogs, or there was
a frog monster there all along.
Yes.
It's one of the guys from the expedition, although we don't know that yet.
Yes. So it's this big hulking frog creature. He has fisticuffs with it, and then...
He kills it and it evaporates, turns into a human skeleton.
Right. So then I think we get to the next issue already, or the next chapter, and they go to the Cavendish mansion, as we mentioned, the manor.
It's somewhere in Lovecraft country.
Yeah.
So somewhere in New England.
It's in a sinking swamp, like it's starting to sink. This is very... Richard Corbin used to draw this castle all the time, this manor, again and again in every comic, and here Mignola's going for it. So Mrs. Cavendish, as I said, she's the mother of these boys. She's the last living one, because the boys went to the Arctic. They didn't come back. Only Broom came back. And he doesn't remember what happened.
No. He says to Hellboy that he doesn't remember. He just remembers. He doesn't remember how he got back.
Right.
The last thing he remembers is jumping off a ship.
Right.
In the bay outside New York City.
By the way, so the first issue ended with a kind of dossier page of the Nazis that were up there.
Love it.
Because we don't really see much of that scene. We get to see Rasputin and one other, his Nazi handler, and that's about it.
I've got a photo. I actually took a picture of the page. It's so fantastic. It's got Rasputin. He's wearing sorcerer's robes. with a pentagram with a dragon and a swastika in the middle of the pentagram. It looks so rad. He's surrounded by these, but they look like Tesla coils, like big condensers. There's machinery with the dragon, with the swastika on it, imprinted around it, and he's sort of droning. He sounds like he's reciting liturgy.
Yeah.
So he's just droning on about the dragon. Heedless are they to prayer and supplication. They are the serpent. They are the furious beast, the windstorm, etc., etc. And then at the bottom of the page, we have some Nazi scientists. So in contrast to what Rasputin is saying and wearing, they say, increase the power, don't let the level drop. It's a perfect combination of crazy sorcery and mad science, which is very evocative of all of my favourite Hellboy comics, of everything I love about the series and the aesthetic.
Yeah.
But yes,
so he had been trying to summon some sort of 7.
He says he's going to summon the
gods,
dragon,
which are 1, 7, which are 1. It's like this. They call it the Great Dragon sometimes, or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's something. It's some cosmic horror that he's trying to pull through some portal. But that
it's very clearly a kind
failed
of Lovecraftian horror. We're going to have to stop ringing the bell because we're going to keep saying Lovecraft over and over.
So they go to this mansion. They talk to the lady, and then they're like, okay, let's search the house. That night they get put up in rooms. Also, the butler seems to be one of the guys that went on one of the expeditions or something. The 9 generations of this family have tried to find something in the Arctic, which the first guy, 9 generations ago, had found some scrap of paper, some clue that he became obsessed with trying to find this thing in the Arctic.
Yes.
And so Abe, because it's sinking like the House of Usher, he's like, okay, I'm gonna go dive. He dives into the water that the swamp that the quagmire that this mansion is sinking into, and Hellboy's like, all right, have a look around too. They go to Liz's room, and she's disappeared.
Yeah.
And then he goes down, and I think he's attacked by, now we get some fights with some more frog people. The sons have come back as frogs.
Yes.
As these giant frog monsters. They've killed the mother.
Yeah.
This has all been orchestrated by Rasputin.
Yes.
It's him again. He's back after 60 years.
Yes.
He never went away. He never died or anything. He's just been hiding in the shadows, I guess, working on this thing.
He went to the mysterious location in the Arctic.
Yes, that's true, yes.
And then meditated for 60 years.
Oh, he meditated. Okay, that's right.
At the foot of the Ogduhem, which is a scrap of the...
Saduhem was the... Saduhem is the statue creature. They left this creature behind as like a foothold into our world.
Yeah. And the Ogdru Jahad.
That's the
sevenfold dragon that lives in the cosmic waste.
And then the explorers had found Rasputin, and then he had awakened, and Saduhem had awakened, and he prevented Saduhem. There's actually a lot of exposition. A lot of stuff about. So he awakened. He stopped Saduhem from eating them. He used them to carry him down to New York, and then he allowed Saduhem to eat people, and then converted these people into frog people, etc.
Basically, there's this gross monster, the Saduhem, which looked like a statue, but is actually a monster.
Yes.
And it's a relic of the distant past. Yeah. A key to the lock to the dragon's prison.
Yeah.
Rasputin finds it and waits for the circumstances that will mean he can summon the dragon to Earth. He doesn't know how long it'll take, but he just waits there.
Yeah.
He's found by Professor Broom, who touches him. In that moment, he knows everything Broom knows. He knows about Hellboy.
Yes.
And he knows that Hellboy is the key that he's been waiting for all this time.
Yes.
That he summoned that night all those years ago.
Is the term Seed of Destruction used in this comic? I couldn't remember. I read it, and then I was like, I thought it referred to Hellboy. Okay.
I don't know if it's used in the text of the comic itself.
I couldn't remember because I flipped through it again. I was like, and I couldn't find it. I felt like they said it, but I might be confused. So then it kicks off. Rasputin is ready to summon the dragons to Earth. He's captured Liz Sherman, whose pyrotechnic ability is actually a better fit for summoning the dragons to Earth even than Hellboy. He wants more power. He's like, I can absorb this power out of her.
He doesn't care about Hellboy anymore.
Yeah.
And he just has one of the swamp frogmen kill him. Meanwhile, Abe Sapien the fishman, has found the ghost of Elijah Cavendish, the patriarch, the long-distant original guy that set off the fever of trying to find this location in the Arctic. His ghost has possessed Abe, and Abe has taken up his harpoon, because he was a whaler, And at the moment of triumph for Rasputin, who is incidentally immune to bullets, there's a great...
Yeah, and he can heal himself. He's got, like, healing powers.
Right, there's magic going on.
And
so
Hellboy
tries to shoot him.
Yeah.
He's like a sorcerer par excellence.
Yeah.
And he's powered up on Liz's ability. Hellboy tries to shoot him in the head, and he thinks he's down. And then there's a great panel where he faces us, the reader. Half of his head is kind of lit up, and he shouts at an unintelligible symbol, and it blasts Hellboy across the room. And he says something like, "You will never raise a hand to me again, child." Right, so back to the kind of big ritual. Abe appears, throws the harpoon through Rasputin's chest.
Before that, Rasputin does tell us how he got here, how everything that's happened. He gives us some Republic villain kind of stuff. So he tells us that when he was assassinated and thrown in the river, then he was found by like this elder god up in this cosmic being. Yeah. This cosmic horror had powered him and kind of has been the one, this force has been driving him to resurrect, bring that thing back to Earth.
Yeah.
So that's his grand plan, and that's why he's doing it, is because he's been sort of semi-possessed mentally by this thing.
Ever since he was in,
to go through these rituals. I'm not sure what Hellboy's, again, on reading, I'm not sure what Hellboy's role was in this.
He doesn't really... Yeah, it's a bit odd because he's not actually essential to the ritual. Because
that's right.
Rasputin makes quite clear that he doesn't even need Hellboy because Hellboy brought Liz Sherman with him, and Liz Sherman's power is enough to wake the Ogdru Jahad alone. So even though Rasputin masterminded drawing Hellboy to the Cavendish house so that he could use him and the Saruhem monster to release the sevenfold dragon from its prison. So that's why he hypnotized Professor Broom, controlled him to make him jump off the boat once they returned to port. Controlled him, and then he knew he would call Hellboy first thing when he returned to his home, which is what he did. And then
this is all very convoluted.
Yeah, you say it's convoluted. It's less convoluted than the film. And I'm a fan of the film. But we'll get to that.
But the thing is, it's all given through dialogue. We don't see these things happening. It's like, oh, I controlled this guy's mind to make him do this and that.
Yes. So he went to all these trouble to summon Hellboy to the Cavendish Manor, where he'd concealed Saruhem, who's a 3-story squid monster, living under the house.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of like ancient statuary down there too, and I'm wondering if that's like, why was that under the house? They say the house has been cursed or whatever, so maybe there's some ancient thing here, I guess.
Well, they're just really rich.
They say even for 2,000 years ago, the natives were avoiding this place. So I don't know, maybe
it's a locus of importance.
Maybe it's like Lovecraft's rats in the walls, where there's like all that stuff underground.
Yeah, I think so, because there's a line in it about how the patriarch Elijah Cavendish specifically chose the location.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's definitely the case. Well, anyway, Rasputin is pierced by a magic spear thrown by Abe, who is possessed by the senior Cavendish. Yeah. It disrupts the ritual. They escape. Rasputin attacks Hellboy in a really cool panel. Everything's lit up in fire because Liz's power without Rasputin to guide it has gone wild and is destroying Saruhem. Rasputin rises up out of the flames, confronts Hellboy. Hellboy kicks the shit out of him, as he does out of everything. And then...
He literally punches into bones.
He punches into bones, and the last thing Rasputin says is, if you kill me, you'll never know who you are.
Yeah.
What your purpose is.
Yeah.
Because I created you, I summoned you. Yeah. And Hellboy says, well, that doesn't sound too bad to me, and he just turns him into bones, and then they leave, and that's pretty much the end of the comic.
There's a very strange page in here which gets me every time. While they're summoning, they're awakening this 7-snake god thing, this cosmic horror.
The Ogdru Jahad.
Suddenly we get a page of aliens in a command center in outer space. One full page dedicated to these aliens. They're like, something is
really
awakening
odd.
the thing which is sealed, and then they're like, oh no, if the only thing that can seal it again is the people that created it.
Really
it's
weird.
very much like something out of Jack Kirby's Fourth World.
Yeah.
I don't know if we ever came back to these aliens at any time. It's a bit like the Torch of Liberty character. It's like a weird idea that was there.
Yeah, it's just there to cement, again, like Torch of Liberty, I think it's just there, as you said, to cement kind of the origins and influences of the world we're looking at. Yeah. So we have some Fourth World crazy almost all like watches from MCU.
Yeah.
Just some odd beings in space who keep an eye on matters natural and supernatural.
Yeah.
I know they show up in Conquer a Worm, which is
okay.
very briefly.
Okay.
But it's never teased out really who they are.
Well, they haven't been retconned though, so that's interesting.
Yeah. So you're right. It's so odd because it's completely different to everything else.
Yeah.
It's just some strange green aliens.
Yes.
They're literally little green men who are in orbit watching Hellboy.
They're out in space or something. They're detecting that their energies, that the thing's about to crack open or whatever.
It's really odd.
It is odd. But you've actually touched on something when you gave us that line that Rasputin gives as he's dying about Hellboy, which is that at a certain stage after 3 or 4 volumes, Mike Mignola stopped drawing these. Now, I came for the art, and I think a lot of people were like, oh, Mike Mignola, and I came in, and as soon as he got replacements, I think Duncan Fegredo was one of the first, they drew like Mignola, but it wasn't Mignola, and I was like, well, I'm here for Mignola drawings, why am I sticking with this? But from all I've heard, he has created a really epic mythology around Hellboy in the years since, even the ones he hasn't drawn. And I guess I kind of dismissed him as a writer and only thought about him as an artist, which was probably not fair. I think he actually has come up with this massive thing around the character, and I heard some spoilers, which I've forgotten since, about like, would they explain his origins and what the arm is and all that stuff, what his role is in Ragnarok and all that kind of stuff, and I was this sounds really actually amazing.
There's a colossal mythos.
Yeah.
And it's spun off as well. I mean,
yes.
So you have the Hellboy comics, some of which, my favourites are all the ones where he's having pulpy style adventures. Yeah. But there's also a long-running meta plot where Hellboy kind of goes on walkabout and he's trying to discover his origins, his purpose, where he came from, where he's going, etc. It's very it's pretty cool because he wanders to all these different places.
We haven't mentioned, sorry, I just want to interrupt for a second. There's a line in here where he says, I hope doesn't go like China in 79. And it's just like one line of dialogue, and you're like, whoa, there's like years of adventures going on here that we are not privy to yet. This is the third issue or second issue or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of Hellboy comics not necessarily drawn by Mignola, just drawn by a rotating stable of artists illustrating Hellboy adventures
in the past,
across his career as an agent for the BPRD. In addition, there are BPRD comics. I think there might even be more BPRD comics now than there are Hellboy ones.
Yeah.
So they are comics that are not about Hellboy, but are about Hellboy's kind of like fellow travelers. So they're about Liz. They're about Abe Sapien. They're about the Muggles that work with them. I think they're still being published. Yeah. I mean, I used to keep up with them, but that was a while ago now. But I think they're still being released.
Right. I believe so. Yeah. They're still
and they're great. I just really, I mean, I don't love anything as much as I love the early Hellboy stuff drawn by, especially the ones drawn by Mignola. Yeah. But I still read a BPRD comic whenever one falls into my hands.
Right.
I just really love the world.
Yes, absolutely.
I love the weirdness. I love the way it's combined all these different strands of early 20th century kind of like pulp literature and comics. I'm a sucker for anything Lovecraftian. And there's a whole lot of kind of like, it's omnivorous. Yeah. And yet it never feels lazy in its world building. It always feels interesting and consistent. Less is more a lot of the time.
Yeah.
We never really how hell exists with love, because like Hellboy is literally the son of like Asmodeus, a demon,
right?
And how reconcile the Christian hell with why does all this happen? It doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
you're just along for the ride. It's brilliant.
Also, I want to point out, you get the sense, especially reading the other stories, and he did a lot of like shorts and stuff in between. They're not all like 5-issue things.
Yep.
I felt like he read a lot of folklore from all over the world, and it was just like, here's a germ of a story idea, and he would do one.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like you kind of get 3 typical Hellboy adventures, I suppose. You've got pulpy stuff where he's fighting heads in jars and Conan-style sorcerers. You've got the meta plot where he's off trying to find out his origins and his role in the apocalypse. And then you've got folklore stories.
A bit like X-Files, now that you describe it that way.
It is a bit like X-Files. Yeah, I think this is very X-Files-esque.
Yeah.
I agree. Similarly, X-Files is all about just that heady mixture of technology, science, religion, magic, anything. Anything subaltern, anything kind of like supernatural. Just throw it all in. Yeah. Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
It's not a coincidence that the X-Files, I guess, is around at the same time as Hellboy.
Yeah.
But the folklore one's probably my least favorite. But he'll be interacting with Kukulane or like the Wheat.
Oh, I quite like those shorts. So we did put on the corpse in this.
Yes.
That was one of the issues we read. It was just like a single issue thing that came out at the time. And it's just Hellboy, like this baby has been abducted by fairies.
Yes.
And replaced, and Hellboy has to go rescue the baby, but in order to do that, he needs to bury this talking corpse, which he carries around on his back. And
this is
just
like an
wanders
Irish.
around.
This is like an Irish folktale
Yeah.
that Hellboy's literally living in.
Yes.
There's a changeling baby, and to get the one that the fairies have snatched back, he has to fulfill a task that they set him under like a huge oak at a crossroads.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious because this corpse is really irreverent.
Yeah.
Like it's always yelling at him.
Yeah.
It's not happy with, that's another thing I love about these. You've got a great mix of kind of high and low culture in some of them, especially in the folklore ones, I suppose. There'll be big, meaningful things going on, and Hellboy will be just exasperated by it all.
Yes.
Or punching it.
Yes. Absolutely, yes. Because that ends up with a punch-up.
Yep.
I just want to mention a few things in Wake the Devil, which was the direct sequel to Seed of Destruction, is maybe the second volume that came out collected. So I mentioned that we saw that dossier page about the Nazis, and that mentioned a few other Nazis that were on the scene along with Rasputin. There was this woman named Ilsa. I love... The name Ilse was just so hilarious.
She-Wolf of the SS.
You immediately think of She-Wolf of the SS. And this guy Cronin, who has
Ruprecht Cronin,
who has this
gas mask for a
gas mask face. Well, it's not even a gas mask. It's like he has various masks that he wears over.
In the comic, he only ever wears a gas mask. He just has a gas mask for a face.
Okay.
In the comic, he's kind of like a very boring character. He's sort of like a bit of a bureaucrat.
Right, and then there was one other, but we learn in Wake the Devil that they've actually been like in cryo sleep in some base up in the Arctic, and they're awakened by the ghost of Rasputin shows up. He's like, "Come on, let's finish this thing." They use Baba Yaga and Hecate or Hecate's the one that is trying to initiate Ragnarok using Hellboy. She throws him into some kind of, I don't know what the word is, it's not like a hell pit or something, but he's in some other form of space, but his horns regrow and he snaps them off with his hands, and that cancels the whole thing. They fail. So I just wanted to mention that because some of those elements do come up in the movie.
That's right.
They weren't invented wholesale.
No, absolutely not. And Mike Mignola is active in the production of this movie.
Yes.
He and
although he didn't write it, which we have seen in some cases.
He didn't write it, but he was very active. And he and Guillermo del Toro are friends.
Okay.
Apparently.
You mean from before the...
I couldn't say if it was from before, but I do know that, they've done a bunch of directors' commentaries together. They seem close.
I think it's possible because Del Toro is such a huge comics guy and knows a huge amount of art, and I think he would know about Mignola's stuff.
And now, yes. Yeah. I couldn't say with certainty, because it's difficult to find a lot of information about this online, actually, surprisingly, because it was a successful film. But judging by... I listened to some of the director's commentary for the 2004 DVD release, and they seem very collegial.
Yeah.
They're talking a lot about the experience they had making the film together, and I know that Mignola has done a lot of artwork for some of Del Toro's previous films.
Okay.
After they've been released. So he's done like the DVD cover art and things. He's done DVD box art for The Devil's Backbone and Kronos, two Del Toro films, which are awesome. So they seem to have, whether or not it precedes the making of this film, they definitely seem to have a close relationship now.
All right. So Guillermo del Toro at some stage comes in to make this movie. Now, at this stage, so 1993, he makes Kronos, this amazing kind of vampire kind of thing.
Cool.
Starring Ron Perlman.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, he's in it. He's not...
Sorry, not starring. He's in it.
He's a supporting actor.
He's the first time they work together. 1997, Mimic. An amazing giant cockroach movie. Really creepy, very skin-crawly kind of movie. Devil's Backbone, 01. I haven't seen that one.
It's really good.
2002, Blade 2.
Yes.
Also with Ron Perlman.
That's right.
2004, Hellboy with Ron Perlman. This movie's now 20 years old.
That's makes me feel old.
2006, Pan's Labyrinth. Now, this is the one where the rest of the world finally realizes what we knew all along, which is that Guillermo del Toro is really great. And he makes scary, interesting movies that are really beautifully designed with lots of interesting creatures and all that kind of stuff, which finally... I guess maybe because it was Spanish language. I don't know what the thing was that made it different, but anyway. So now he's suddenly in superstar status. Yeah. Then we get Hellboy 2 in 2008 with Perlman. Pacific Rim 2013, Ron Perlman again. Yeah. Crimson Peak, Shape of Water, another giant one. Yep. And then Nightmare Alley.
The first science fiction film to win a Best Picture Oscar.
Right. And then Nightmare Alley in 2021, again with Ron Perlman in a role in there.
Yeah.
Ron Perlman has been in... So he was in Prince Valiant. He's in Hellboy. Yes. He's going to have more coming up. So he's going to get all-star status. Yes. I also looked up, besides the movies that we are going to cover, he was in the Howard Lovecraft. You can ring the bell for that one. Those kids cartoons. I think they're like direct-to-video or something.
Oh, awful.
So I don't know if we watched them. But they were based on comics.
Oh, were they? Okay.
Yeah. And he was... Okay. I couldn't even write down all his... TV voice credits for comics.
Credits, yeah.
Like Clayface and Batman the Animated Series. He was in Phantom 2040. He was in Fantastic Four, Iron Man, the Superman cartoon. He was in the Men in Black cartoon, Static Shock, Justice League, Teen Titans. He was Slade.
Yes, he was.
And,
he was the original Slade. We mentioned this in the Teen Titans episode.
Green Lantern, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He was in the live-action The Tick series in one episode in some role.
Was he? Yeah. I don't remember. I watched the live-action Tick series. Of course, everything you just described is beyond the scope of the podcast.
No, yes, of course. So I have to listen before I have to enter them for the record.
For the record. He's very much a friend of the show, Ron Perlman.
Yes.
I love Ron Perlman in anything.
Yeah.
I'm always excited
absolutely.
to see him.
Yeah.
He's a fantastic actor.
Yeah.
In his 50s, when this was made,
crazy.
He must be almost in his 70s now.
Crazy.
He must be in his 70s now.
I think he's 72 or 73 now.
Yeah. It's astonishing that he was in his 50s when he did this.
And he's playing like a teenager.
You're right. We'll come back to that. He was committed. He was committed to the role. He read all the Hellboy comics.
Right.
And worked out 3 times a day.
Wow.
7 days a week, or 5 to 7 days a week.
Wow.
To get in shape for the role, and continued to work out throughout.
I actually had a question about this. So when we see him doing those curls, those dumbbell curls,
that's all real, baby.
Those are prosthetic biceps.
That's Ron Perlman. Well, he has some prosthetics on.
Yeah, of course.
But he's in shape. Oh, yeah.
Holy shit. Okay.
That's all Ron Perlman, baby. Doing those dumbbells, those barbells.
Yeah.
Doing those curls.
Wow.
So let's jump into the film.
Okay.
It starts off...
Voiceover from John Hurt.
Comic Book Movie Oblivion All-Star now, officially.
Alright, I gotta insert the sound effect there for John Hurt. So we've had... Snowpiercer, V for Vendetta.
And now this.
Yeah.
He gives us a bit of a voiceover about choices and what makes a man a man.
Yes, we start in 1944, just like the comic, The Ritual, happening in one location this time.
A great choice.
Change.
A genius choice, yeah.
Yeah, because they actually, instead of... What happens is the ritual happens, the portal opens, but the Americans attack during the ritual, so the portal will close, but Rasputin gets sucked into it.
Yeah.
Before...
I want to talk about this scene in detail.
Yeah, let's do it.
This scene is so great. It might be my favourite scene in the whole film.
Yep.
It's so fantastic. So it's pouring rain. They're in an old abandoned church which has been lovingly constructed by the set designer, and we hardly ever see it. In the director's commentary, Del Toro talks about how he was trying to set up what he calls Mignola-esque shots.
I want to say... Okay, let's pause for a second there.
Please.
One of the things the whole reason we started the podcast, one of my primary interests is you see a comic book sometimes with very idiosyncratic artwork like Frank Miller or Mike Mignola.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm going to make a movie of this. And my question is, why are you making a movie of it? Because it looks that way, and that's the selling point, is the way it looks. So why would you remove that completely into another medium, and as if you're still going to have some selling point? Well, I mean, I'm not saying that there's no meat in Hellboy, of course there is. I think this is one of the one times, and I think we had it with Sin City too, I think you have to have balls to do it. But you really need a very distinctive visual stylist to come in there and do something as visually as arresting as the comic was.
The comic book aesthetic rarely makes the jump. I think we've established that over the last year or so. The aesthetic itself seldomly makes the jump.
Yeah.
Great stories, interesting characters. It's a fertile field for that kind of stuff, but the comic book aesthetic visually represented
Even
in
animated,
film.
even in heavy metal, could not capture the visuals in the
It's
same.
rare.
Yeah.
But Del Toro is very aware of it, and he's making an effort to set up what he actually describes as Mignola-esque.
Yeah.
I listened to about half an hour of the director's commentary. And both Mike Mignola, this is director's commentary with Del Toro and Mike Mignola together giving comments on the film as they're watching it. Both Del Toro and Mignola use the phrase Mignola-esque
Right.
repeatedly, which is quite funny. So there's this bit, it's in this first scene, it's so great. You've got period, kind of like World War II era American GIs, you got a chain-smoking sergeant, kind of like pugnacious, slightly overweight. Doesn't hold with all this malarkey, this supernatural malarkey.
He's a bit like that in the comic too, from his...
Hard, so good. And he's smoking a cigar, which is, later on Hellboy smokes a cigar.
Yes.
I didn't pick up on this on my first viewing or even on my fifth, but listening to the commentary, a lot of Hellboy's later characterizations are all foreshadowed in this scene.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I did not pick up on that.
No, I didn't, me neither, but it's even his fondness for cats. There are statues of cats in the church.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
so good.
I was about to comment on the cats, but yeah, because I was like...
Why does he like cats?
Why
It's not
is it
something
cats?
from
It's
the
not
comics.
in the comics. Yeah.
There's a frieze sort of where Hellboy first manifests. It has cats featured in it.
Oh wow.
That's why he likes cats. So
Okay.
much of his identity is taken from the circumstances of his birth,
Okay.
which kind of feeds into the theme, I suppose, the theme of the comic, of the film, which is, who are you?
Yeah.
Do
The
you
only
choose
thing that's...
your origins, or do you go with your origins, or do you make a choice as to who you're going to be?
Yeah, the only thing that's really telegraphed is the Baby Ruth bars, because they must have been paid for to be in the movie, because he gets Baby Ruth as a baby.
I have relevant director's commentary on this issue as well.
Okay.
This is something they cooked up for it.
Okay.
And they did the research. There were 3 candy properties that that existed in the 1940s that were still extant in 2004.
Okay.
Baby Ruth was one of them.
Wow.
Guillermo del Toro tried them all. And Baby Ruth was his favourite. as a connoisseur of candy.
Imagine, so he sent his assistant out, I want you to buy these 3 bars and bring them back.
That's exactly
and
what
his
happened.
poor put-upon assistant is like, oh, okay.
I have no trouble believing this because Del Toro is a big fat guy.
That's amazing.
So good. Wait. So I've got distracted again. This scene's so great. It's at night. It's all lit up with kind of like big Nazi spotlights.
Yeah.
A bit like that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where they open the Ark. Pouring rain. We have crazy Nazis in crazy uniforms, including technicians who wear full kind of body yellow leather outfits.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much trivia you want, but
And okay, go for it. Sorry, go ahead.
they were not originally dressed in those.
Okay.
It was so cold. They were filming in almost all this film was shot in the Czech Republic.
Okay.
It was so cold. I think this was a 6-week shoot just for this opening scene. Under artificial rain, like every day. Eventually, I think producers, Del Toro himself, felt bad enough for these extras that they redesigned their outfits so that their heads would be covered.
Okay.
So they wouldn't be too cold.
I want to say we get our first glimpse of Cronin in this scene. Now,
So great.
as I said, in the comic, we don't even see, except for that one page of Dossier in Volume 1, they don't appear until Volume 2. He is scary. This dude the design is one of the best designs I've ever seen in any movie for a monster/villain type character. And it just gets more and more, as the movie progresses, you just get more and more of this horrible craziness of this guy, and the beautiful shininess of the helmet, and all this gear.
He's a clockwork Nazi ninja.
Which we don't know yet. At this point, he's just a guy wearing a weird helmet, and he gets killed.
Like a gas mask.
He gets killed, and then his body disappears, like Michael Myers. You're like, where'd he go?
Yeah.
He's like stabbed, like he's pinned to a post with this like giant spear.
When the portal
kind of
explodes. There's a line again from the director's commentary where both Mignola and Del Toro talk about how much they love Cronin, how great he is, and Mignola says, when Cronin first appears, when he's standing still, it's pure Mignola. It's like the character from my comic.
Yeah.
And he said, as soon as he moves, he's pure Del Toro.
Right. He doesn't speak.
No, he doesn't have a single line.
Which is not like the comics version. The comics version speaks a lot, and he's kind of a bumbler at some stages.
He's kind of like a kind of hapless, almost like bureaucrat.
Yeah.
Don't damage the machinery!
Yeah.
It completely reimagined in the film as the thing that everyone remembers about it.
Yeah.
Which is he has a sort of heart powered by clockwork, a crazy clockwork key, just kind of like the vampire thing in Kronos, the thing that makes you a vampire in Kronos, that crazy scarab.
So you can wind it up or wind it down to appear dead.
Yeah. It's so great.
Yeah.
And he's a ninja too.
Yes. So it all happens at once. So Hellboy appears in the same location, not in a distant location, but because of the American attack, the portal thing has gone wrong. It's been closed early, and Rasputin has been sucked through it. Ilsa is there, and he grants her immortality
in a deleted scene. Yeah.
Well, is it deleted? Oh, so it's in the director's cut.
I think it's in the director's cut.
Okay.
Otherwise, we just accept that Ilsa is really
alive
young.
60 years later. Yeah. Well, you have to accept that Rasputin has the power to give people immortality just by saying so. He's just like, I grant you immortality. And then she's immortal, and it's okay. I was like, he's pretty overpowered in this movie compared to like the comic where I thought, he can heal himself and has all sorts of powers.
Well, I'm not sure. I feel like in the film, he's mostly the puppet master. He doesn't...
That's true, but he can,
He seems, in fact, not to be anywhere most of the time. He seems to only be able to go where his henchmen go. I almost feel like he's...
that might be right, actually. I think that's factually correct. We'll get back to it. I think he can only appear where his henchmen are.
Yeah.
He can't just go anywhere he wants. I'm not sure why that is. It's not... Maybe that's another cut scene that's not even in the director's version. But anyway, so he just says, I grant you immortality. And anything else? So you wanted to go deeper into the scene. Anything else?
Just to say, this scene's great. Even if you don't want to watch this movie, just watch Hellboy opening scene.
Yeah.
The portal is this huge Magitech device. Rasputin opens it with a giant fake Hellboy hand made out of clockwork.
Yeah.
Huge bulky cables, electricity, and crazy, looks like valves all over it.
Yeah, it's cool. It's
filled
really
with
cool.
mad substance, and he shoots lightning out of it to open the portal.
Yeah.
So amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
really
so great.
It is really great.
And then they just throw, the Americans, instead of just watching in awe, throw grenades at the portal and blow it up. Cronin, the clockwork ninja, tries to grab the grenade out from under the portal.
Okay.
To prevent it from blowing up. And the portal...
Oh, that's what...
The portal chops his hand off. That's why he has a clockwork hand later in the
film. He
film.
has those two blades that shoot out of the back of his wrists.
Yep.
Now, remember, weren't we talking on the show where somebody had blades that shot out, and I was like, I've seen this before somewhere. Was it Jiu-Jitsu? Did that alien have blades?
Yes, he did.
Okay. So I was like, so this is what I remembered it from.
Great.
And he retracts the blades, and then the grenade's under the thing, and he can't reach it. I'm like, shoot that blade out.
Shoot that blade out. Well, that would have just pushed it further away under the portal. But yeah, I mean, it might have helped. Well, anyway, the portal destroys his hand, and that's why he has that Baroque clockwork hand later on. So cool.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, Hellboy appears.
Little baby.
Professor Broom gives him the
Baby Ruth bar.
They take a photo.
Which is in the comic. Yeah. Just like in the comic, you get the black and white photo with all the troops lined up. It's like a posed photo with little Hell Baby in the front.
Yeah.
We did get some Hell Baby stories, by the way.
They were on the 2004 DVD, which was my first... In that 2004 DVD, which came out only a few...
What do you mean, the comics were on the DVD?
Yeah. There was, when you watched the film, a little BPRD symbol would flash up in the corner. Okay. And then if you pressed enter on your remote, it would go to a comic... Like a tie-in comic with like baby Hellboy.
Okay.
It was rad.
Yeah.
It's made in 2004.
My favorite Hellboy story is Pancakes. Which I think we'll talk about next week.
That popped up on the DVD.
We will talk about that at some stage. So, Hellbaby appears and they kind of go through the awkward motions of naming him Hellboy, which is awkward in the comic, but it's comic booky and they have to work a bit harder. awkward in the comic too, I think, naming it Hellboy. Anyway,
Opening titles, lots of newspapers floating around.
Opening titles, but we don't get any credits. It's just floating newspaper headlines in bad CG, floating in a bad CG hallway, and these headlines float up and say, "Is Hellboy a hoax?" One of them says "Leaping Lizards," which is a reference to Harold Gray's Little Orphan Annie, by the way.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's like. So we get a sense of the world 60 years later, which is that Hellboy is considered to be a hoax.
Yeah, well here he's a secret.
Yes.
He's not. The world is not allowed to know the existence of Hellboy.
Yes.
So unlike in the comics where it's just played straight, no one ever reacts. It's like Coneheads. No one ever reacts to Hellboy's bizarre appearance. It's just played straight.
Yeah.
Fine. I don't have a problem with it. I guess they didn't feel like that would work in the film.
Yeah.
Fine. I think this film makes a lot of compromises, which we will get into as we go through, because of when it came out.
Okay.
This is pre-MCU, 2004, obviously 3-4 years before Iron Man comes out. Studio producers, they don't have the mental space to process that you can make a film about crazy superhero nonsense without a whole bunch of... without a whole bunch of compromise, a whole bunch of tropes. Why doesn't anyone... Hellboy's got to be a conspiracy, otherwise people won't understand why he's out and about. We need a protagonist.
Yeah.
We need a guy to explain all this craziness to us.
Well, we'll get into that.
Absolutely, we will.
Okay, so after this non-credit sequence, we just get floating down this terrible hallway with these floating headlines, and then it says Hellboy. We get a title card, but we haven't heard the actors or director, and none of that stuff's in here. It's weird, very weird, because we spent like a minute in here. I guess just establishing that Hellboy's considered a hoax by the world he's spotted sometimes, but...
A bit of world building. It's fine. As world building, it's fine.
So now do we get the summoning of Rasputin scene, the resurrection? Okay, so now this is pretty great. So we get Ilsa and Cronin. We don't know it's them. Initially there's people in hoods going up to this temple in the Arctic, which is a bit like in the comic. There's
very much
a temple in the Arctic. And they even pay with Nazi gold. This guy wants his gold. And there's a line in the comic when Rasputin is going up there, he's like, they just wanted gold. They didn't care about what I was exploring.
Yeah, they pay him with Nazi gold. Great bit of visual
But then they kill him.
They kill him anyway.
And his blood...
It's just there for us to know that they're Nazis.
Yeah. His blood drips into, goes through these grooves in this big ritual thing. And then Rasputin comes out of this pit.
Yeah. And he's all covered in red goop.
He's covered in red goop. Awesome scene.
It's great, and the setting, it's all blue, so it's kind of, again, it's like a page in a Mignola comic. Everything's blue and white because we're up in the frozen mountains of the Arctic. There's some cool kind of statuary around, and then as you said, there's this.
The statuary looks like Mignola drew it, and even in that 1944 scene when we see it, it looks like he. Yeah.
Well, he was active in assisting with, I think, things like set design, and he was on set.
Okay.
Some or most of the time.
So I guess he's been summoned back from the cosmic wastes from outer space. So I'm assuming this temple is related to that. That would work in the sense of what the source material, but it's not delineated.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Don't ask questions. He's just back, baby.
Yeah.
You need a human sacrifice and you bring him back from the afterlife.
Right. Next scene, we get John Hurt. He's now an old man.
Yep.
And he's at the hospital.
Professor Broom is now an old man played by John Hurt.
Professor Broom is an old man played by John Hurt. He's in the hospital. He's just been told he has cancer by the doctors.
Yep.
And he has a limited amount of time to live. Then we get a TV talk show on which Tom Manning, who is this FBI guy, is there to debunk myths about Hellboy. And
played excellently by
Jeffrey Tambor. So he's...
Play the sound effect. He is now an all-star, having appeared in Death of Stalin,
Brenda Starr,
and now this.
Yeah. So he's an all-star. So he's... This is a great moment because he says there is this Bureau of... The interviewer says, what about the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense?
And he looks into camera.
By the way, Manning is a character in the comic, but he's only got one line in Seed of Destruction or something. Yeah. He's not as prickly as this guy is.
Yeah.
But he's like this Bureau of... What did you call it? He's like Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense. There is no such thing, he says, and then we get cut to this building and a title card that says Bureau of
Paranormal Research and Defense.
It's really great. Okay, now we get to this guy that we were talking about. Now, this new
John
FBI agent, he's just out of Quantico, named John Myers,
He might as
shows
well be
up.
called John Everyman.
Yeah, he's the audience surrogate. He's the new guy that comes in. He's like, oh, what's on? There is a character like this in Wake the Devil. There's a new agent that comes in. And in fact, he is the one that, like, Liz tells him, I've quit the Bureau 13 times and I keep coming back. Where else am I going to go? He's the guy. He's the new guy. So there is a kind of character like this in the comic, but
So it's not just the producers saying, where's our audience surrogogate?
Yeah.
He actually does exist in the comics.
A version, a sort of, but it's not until the second volume where you don't have you don't have voiceover narration from Hellboy in the second volume.
You've made it pretty clear that, I mean, they've been coming out since 93, and this film's being made in 2004. They're clearly not just adapting straight Seed of Destruction.
Right.
They're drawing on that corpus of Hellboy comics that have been published in the intervening 10 years.
So they found a solution for this thing to get more information to the viewer, which is this character, John Myers, who shows up. He's a newbie, comes to the Bureau. It's all sorts of weird stuff, sci-fi stuff in there. We meet Abe for the first time, who is not just a fishman, but is also psychic.
Yes.
And later we learn has psychometry, is that what it's called?
Psychometry, yeah. You can touch an object and see its past,
its history,
and its future.
It's kind of a bit too much for this character.
I don't agree.
Okay.
I think this is a good change.
I feel like it should be a third character, because why would a fish don't have psychic powers?
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. But, look, sure, but I like the dichotomy it sets up with Hellboy. So, in this, we have Hellboy and Abe Sapien. They're the two agents that the two field agents that the BPRD send into sticky situations.
Yeah.
And they complement each other. Hellboy, first of all, is red.
Yes.
But he's boisterous, noisy, likes to go off on his own, fights and shoots, super strong, resolves situations by punching them. Abe is like the opposite. He's blue,
the reader.
He's
a thinker.
He reads. He thinks. He's frail. He's psychic.
Yeah.
Instead, he's the support guy, and also he, as a personality rise, he's quite meek. He's fussy, prissy. He's voiced by Niles from Frasier.
Yes, David Hyde Pierce.
Yes, that's it. Right.
But we have to mention he was played by
Doug Jones.
So
Comic book movie Oblivion All-Star.
All-Star.
S-Class.
S rank. Yes, All-Star S rank, because now this is his
fourth film.
Fourth.
Yeah.
So we've had Monkey Bone.
Yes.
Mystery Men.
Yes. Tank Girl, where he played a Ripper.
Tank Girl.
Yeah, and now this.
Hellboy.
And this is, of course, he's a main character.
Yes.
Although he sounds quite a bit like, his voice, if you've seen him play Saru, and indeed he voices himself in Golden Army, which we'll get to.
Right.
He could have voiced himself in this, but they weren't confident. They wanted a big name.
You know what? David Hyde Pierce has a very soothing voice.
He's great,
It's very calming, and
But David Hyde Pierce refused credit for this role.
Right.
He is not credited.
Okay.
Only Doug Jones is credited as Abe Sapien. Allegedly because he had so much respect for Doug Jones's performance.
Okay.
I've got a quote which I read from a interview with Doug Jones around about the time that Golden Army came out in 2008. This is quite a long quote. He says, David Hyde Pierce did the voiceover for the first film because he was the bigger name and had the more recognisable sound. When you're marketing a film, that's a part of the filmmaking world that I'm not a part of. Not anymore. David Hyde Pierce is a consummate gentleman. When he came in to do the voiceover for the first time, he saw and heard my performance on the film. He backed away and he said, why am I here? He ended up doing the job he was hired to do, but in the end refused to take any credit in the film. He didn't show up to the premiere and he didn't do any press for the film.
Doesn't that negate the whole point of them hiring him?
When asked why, his answer was, out of respect for Doug Jones.
Yeah. But they're hiring David Hyde Pierce for the name, and he refuses to have his name on it or go to any of the any publicity.
Pretty
for
principled
it.
of him, really.
Yeah.
It completely undermined and also undermined their goal,
That's what I'm
which
saying,
would have led to Doug Jones voicing Abe Sapien himself in subsequent appearances, including the cartoons and the Golden Army. So, I mean, otherwise, Hyde Pierce might have kept doing it.
Right. Okay.
No, but I think that's quite admirable, actually.
But anyway, all the dichotomy between Hellboy and Abe which you mentioned, I agree with all of it, but being psychic is not, I don't think that's, if you were unbolt that from it.
I think it's fine. Psychic is just a kind of, it's like the opposite of punching stuff.
Okay, psychic,
I'm okay with it.
Because maybe we got some dolphin thing going
and
on.
Also,
but
it's like, why is he a
on.
fish man? Well, I mean, he's just he's psychometry seems to be the extent of his psychic power, right?
But not only that, because he touches Broom and gives the visions to Broom. This is powerful stuff.
I'm okay with it because, I mean, when you Abe Sapien in the comics, especially in the early comics, he's just sort of like fish Hellboy.
Yes.
As the comics go on, he gets more characterization and an interesting past, and he becomes he's quite a bit more melancholy than Hellboy, and he gets his own distinct characterization. But especially in the early ones, he's like Fishman that punches stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, I like, and I think it's a strength of the movie that they tweaked his nature for it.
Okay.
That's what I think anyway.
Okay, so now we finally get to Hellboy, and we learn that he's been grounded.
Yeah.
So, and the...
Because he keeps escaping.
The guy who's his head handler or whatever, what's his name? Clay. Clay says he ages like the opposite of a dog, so he's been around for 6 years, but it's like he's in his 20s.
Yeah.
But my thing is he's grounded, so it's more like he's in his teens.
He's an adolescent. He's very adolescent.
I think they leaned into the boy of the title, which is awkward in the comics. Even in the comics, it's weird that his name is Hellboy. And I think they were like, this is almost like an executive thing, or I don't know, they were like, oh, his name is Boy, he's got to be a boy, he's got to be a teenager. It's weird that he's locked in. I don't know if we get some backstory, as I mentioned, in the later Hellboy comics, we get lots of his past adventures. I don't know if there's any stage at which he was grounded.
Right, no, never. No, it's very different. So, in the comics, as we said, Hellboy is quite mature.
Yeah.
Hard-bitten, a bit like a noir detective. And he's irreverent, but he's also terse, as you pointed out earlier. The Hellboy we get in the film is quite different. Superficially similar, but quite different. As you pointed out, he's very adolescent. So he's not let off the leash to go on solitary adventures like comic book Hellboy is.
Yeah.
He's kept on a tight leash because he's childish.
Yes, they keep calling him the child.
Yeah.
They refer to him as a child again and again.
He's passionate.
Yes.
So, we know that comic book Hellboy gets angry a lot, allegedly. I mean, it talks about it in the...
Yeah, he described himself
as angry, but I mean, he sort of seems more like a slow burn kind of anger. He never really freaks out. He doesn't go Hulk mode, you know.
No, he gets punched and he says, now I'm mad. It's that kind of thing, yeah.
Whereas this Hellboy, he flies off the handle at things. He's a lover.
Yeah.
Because he's pining after Liz, and something that's not present in the comics, incidentally.
Right, yeah, that's a key thing.
Very much an invention.
I did wonder if it came up later or something in the comics, but it doesn't seem like...
No, it never
It seems
does.
like he's too old for her.
He never does. They're close, but as friends.
Yeah.
And he's a wisecracker.
Yes. Which he is kind of in Wake the Devil.
Yes.
But I think the interesting thing is...
It's more subdued.
Yes, and I think Ron Perlman there's a lot of inflection when he delivers his lines, and even his little his uh-ohs are really like he's acting these lines.
It's great.
And you can't...
I just love the scene where we meet him. He's just so grumpy.
Yes.
And he's messing with Myers. Remember when the klaxon goes off and he goes, hey, 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 they're playing our song.
Yeah.
He says it around his cigar.
I think he's you can see that no actor would want to come in and have to deliver their dialogue in a monotone. No actor would want to do that. And you can see why he would come in and do it with a lot of inflection. And like I said, initially, the first 3 times I watched this, I was like, that's not like Hellboy in the comics. But after reading Wake the Devil, it's like, oh, actually, he is into like a later stage kind of Mignola's writing.
As to why he's like, but yeah, there's a clear difference between comic and film. I mean, I agree that he is like the one in Wake the Devil, but I still think emotionally...
Yeah.
And in terms of their respective maturity, there's a clear difference between comic and film Hellboy. And I don't think it's executive pressure. I think it has to do with the theme as envisioned by Del Toro in his script.
Okay.
So, Del Toro, the script that he wrote in collaboration with someone called Peter Briggs, who I'm absolutely coming back to, a big theme of this movie is growing up.
Yeah.
And when you're deciding what kind of man you want to be. So we have all these hints scattered through that Hellboy is just... What is Hellboy? Is he a product of his environment and his background? So much of his personality is drawn from the circumstances of his appearance, like the cats, the cigar, all that great stuff. And he's also, you know, even though he's 60 years old, he's like a 20-year-old kid. And then Rasputin appears, telling him that, yeah, you know, you are the thing that I summoned in that church. You can't deny it. Your whole life has just really been that. And we're asked, is Hellboy the kind of person that Broom tried to make him? A kind of person who's decent, cares about people? Or is he just going to be a cipher, a tool, a reflection of the things around him and the desires of the guy that wants to use him to bring on the apocalypse? And him being childish is part of that thing.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
I mean, that's why that's another thing. This is what I got off the director's commentary. That's why there's so many labyrinths in the film too. Like Del Toro stuck a bunch of labyrinths in because he wanted us to make that visual association, which I didn't, incidentally, that Hellboy is wandering a maze trying to figure out who he is. That's why the blood gutters at the start are a labyrinth.
Right. Okay. So the alarm goes off as Myers is meeting Hellboy, and it's an incident at a museum, much like Ghostbusters. So, was that a museum? No, they got the hotel. It's a library.
Technically, it's a library. It's a library.
No, I mean in Ghostbusters, it was a library.
It's a library in this too. It's a building. It's the Ministry of Transport in Prague. So all of the location shots are in Prague.
Okay.
But it's called in the film it's called the Machen Library. Okay. Named after Arthur Machen, the Welsh fantasy author who wrote The Great God Pan.
Yeah, right.
And inspired H.P. Lovecraft, among many other authors of weird fiction, including Mignola himself.
Okay.
So it's a nod to that.
I thought it was Machen. Is it Machen?
Well, I don't know. It probably is Machen.
Okay.
I've never heard it spoken. I've only seen it.
Okay, I have read that story.
So have I, yeah.
Yeah.
So a note to the influences there. Also, while we're on the subject, the other prominent location shot, the squeaky clean headquarters of the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense.
Yeah, that brutalist building.
Beautiful building.
The exterior, you mean?
It's another Prague building.
Okay.
It's a national monument in the Czech Republic, dedicated to fallen soldiers in the Second World War, I think.
Okay.
And the lobby of the BPRD is the actual interior of that building.
Wow. Okay.
And they only made some small changes to it, like adding that big sword symbol,
the BPRD
and the desk with the cranky security guard behind it. But the rest apparently is the interior of that building.
Huh.
Pretty groovy looking building, yeah. Built during the communist period.
Right. So we get to the museum. We don't know what's happened in there exactly. I think Abe is able to... He puts his hand against the door and he can sense that something dark. There's some bad stuff in there. So Hellboy goes in there with his guns as usual, which is his thing. He just shoots stuff. There is a big creature in there, which is a bit like the frog monsters, I guess.
It is a bit like the frog monsters.
At a stretch, it's similar, except there's way more detail. It's full CG.
Only sometimes. No, sometimes it's a rubber suit.
Sometimes it's real.
No, sometimes it's a combination of practical and CG effect.
I think that sometimes when it's full CG, it's really obvious. Especially if it's too...
I think sometimes when it's the rubber suit, also it's really obvious.
Yeah.
This is 2004. It's really good. I don't have a problem with it.
No. I'm saying even now, if you look at CG monsters jumping around and stuff, you're like, that's bad CG. Yeah. All the time. Even now, 2023. So 20 years ago, I mean, okay, you did an okay job. The problem is when you get when a monster is fighting Hellboy, and Hellboy is also CG, or fighting Abe, and Abe is also CG, then it's like, this is boring, I don't care about this, and it looks fake, because the motions are too smooth, which is still the case today. So anyway, he has there's a huge fight, this is a big set piece in here, where he fights the thing. Hellboy gets thrown out a window, lands in an alley, and Rasputin is there, and he recognizes his voice, which is a thing that happens when he sees Rasputin for the first time in the comic. He's I know that voice. I was like, how did Rasputin know he's going to land in the alley? But that's actually not what happened, because he's able to disappear and reappear at will, seemingly near where his minions are, which we will get back to, why I think that's the case later on. So then he has to fight this thing out in the streets. It goes down in the subway. They have a big fight down in the subway where he has to fight this monster. And then when it dies, these two weird, like, flames, floating balls of fire come out of it and fly away.
Yeah. Well, a fireball rises from the corpse and then splits in two.
Yeah.
I remember watching it for the first time, and I think in the theatrical cut, there's a voiceover from Rasputin.
Oh.
Saying, we watched the director's cut this week, which I had never seen. I've watched this film a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Probably, like I said, I had it on DVD I bought it on DVD in 2004. I bought a pirated copy in China. But I loved this DVD, and I loved this movie. I watched it a whole bunch of times. Never even knew there was a director's cut. And it was only when I started watching it this week that I realised, oh my god, this is the scene I haven't seen before. And I promptly texted you right away. Saying, oh my god, this is an extended version. It's only about 10 minutes longer, and it's mostly character stuff. But anyway, in the theatrical release, I believe when that fireball rises, we hear a voiceover from Rasputin saying, Samael, I tell you this, when one of you falls, two shall rise.
Well, he gives that line later anyway.
Yeah, that's presumably where they cribbed it from and stuck it on that scene.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, Hellboy has samurai hair.
He does, which he does in the comics too.
Knot.
He does.
Does he?
Not in the ones we've read, but
later on.
Later on.
Okay.
And also, he goes to Japan quite a bit.
Okay.
In some of his backstory adventures.
Okay.
And meets kind of Japanese. He meets those flying heads. You know, the ones that.
Yes.
You know what they are. You know, they go off the bodies and go around, fly around at night.
Is that more of a Malaysian thing?
It is a Malaysian thing, the Penanggalan. But that one has like a whole bunch of entrails hanging out as well.
Right.
These ones were just heads. I'm pretty sure it is the thing in Japanese films.
By the way, sometimes during this battle, when Hellboy jumps off of something and makes these big jumps, it really looks like a Mignola pose or drawing, and I really like those moments when he's those huge, like 20-foot leaps in the air or whatever. I will say that the music is very bland. The score and also the soundtrack, all the songs on it are very 2004 post-indie crud.
Except for Red Right Hand.
Except for Red, when that's a cover version.
Is it? It's not
it's not the original. It's not the Nikkei version. No. And also, there's that I'm Gonna Give You Hellboy song over the end credits is one of the worst things I've ever heard in my life.
It does.
Who recorded that? I tried to look it up. I couldn't find. Anyway,
I think the leitmotif for Professor Broom is okay.
You know what? There's a bit of a theme at the end when he's rescuing Liz, and there's a bit of swell. That's pretty good. But the rest of it, I just like. This is just very generic stuff. But anyway, okay. So
Danny Elfman does the sequel. We'll get to that.
Oh right. Okay. So now we learn a bit about Liz because after the fight, he's like, "I'm not going to go back to the BPRD." Hellboy's like, "I'm going to go." I'm going to go somewhere else. So he goes to visit Liz. Now we finally get to Liz. We've kind of getting hints. I think he was watching like CCTV footage of her before they went to the museum. So
I wanted to see her. No one's business.
Yeah. So now we get there's this romantic interest of Liz, which as we mentioned isn't in the comic.
No.
It's Selma Blair, she's really great in this. And she's really great at emoting with her eyes, and Del Toro's very smart about giving her a lot of close-ups because she can really act. And we get some backstory for her as well, which we don't get in the comics. She gets quite a few scenes with a lot of...
In the extended version, we get quite a few scenes with her and Myers interacting too, which definitely helps for later on where they may or may not have chemistry. Well, they have a kind of chemistry.
I don't think they do. Even in the director's cut, I don't think I think it's imagined. I think it's overlaid by the script, but it doesn't exist. I never for a second...
It's hard to say if it's in Hellboy's mind or if they're actually hitting it off.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with it because it's sort of... in these added scenes, we get why it's Myers that's visiting her.
Yes.
And why it's always Myers that seems to be at the center of the action, because we get some scenes where Myers says, "Oh, I should go get Hellboy."
Right.
And Professor Broom's like, "Yes, that makes sense because that's why I brought you on the team.
Yeah.
Whereas in the theatrical cut, he just shows up in all the important spots. Why is it Myers again?
Yeah.
The film is really shoving Myers down my throat. Why didn't someone who knows Hellboy actually go and pick him up from the... No, and it explains why he's the one to go and pick up Liz. We have that scene where they're taking photos of one another in the taxi.
Yeah.
She's relaxed around him.
Yes.
Selma Blair really sells it. Whoever's playing Myers is just kind of going through the motions. And he takes her out for coffee, and Hellboy gets really grumpy about it. So grumpy about it that he crushes a Red Bull can in his red right hand.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's not obvious if he's just trying to smooth her transition back into the BPRD,
Right.
or if he has some kind of romantic interest in her.
Right.
Hellboy thinks absolutely he has romantic interest in her.
And he assumes it's kind of Hellboy because he thinks also because of his looks, like he's a red demon creature, and Myers is a human-looking guy. That scene where he throws a stone at him is really funny. It's one of the funniest bits in the movie.
The old yawning trick.
But actually, one thing I will say is that there's no romance in the comic, but actually I really liked it in the movie. There's a lot of scenes. This is like a 2 hour 12 in the director's cut.
Yeah.
And I liked that all these scenes were in there, and I liked that Liz had a lot of development. It wasn't just her dossier read to us by Hellboy like it is in the comic. We actually get to see scenes of her as a little kid.
I agree. It wouldn't make sense in the comics because Hellboy is in his 60s. He's kind of like a grumpy old man. In this, of course, he's a hot-blooded adolescent.
Yeah.
It makes sense that he lusts after Liz, and it's a great...
And they have a very... actually mature relationship, like especially from her side. Like she's like, if I need to do this to learn to control my powers and stuff, I can't be with you. Like,
yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it's...
Yeah, I've absolutely no problem with it.
And I liked all the scenes when they were in there. I was like surprised that they were in there, but then I was like, this actually makes sense for the movie, and it's good for the movie.
Yeah.
And that bit with the stone was so funny. So basically, he goes to visit her. Finally, they retrieve Hellboy. They go back to base. Rasputin refers to that dog frog creature as the seed of destruction.
Yes, it's mentioned. It's in the
in the text that Abe reads.
Abe reads it as well. It's one of its names. I think it's just a nod to the comic.
I guess
because it's not the seed of destruction. It's just a random mook.
Its only purpose
is to get. It's just one of its cool names. It has heaps of cool names, right?
Yeah.
It's like called Seed of Destruction, Scion of Darkness, Son of Nergal.
Yeah.
And then eventually Hound of the Resurrection.
Yes.
There's a great scene where Hellboy thinks he's dispatched... This is back in the library. Hellboy thinks he's dispatched Samael, and he's just strolling back to the van to go home. And Abe calls him up, and he goes, I've got some more data on the monster. And Hellboy goes, I don't need it. I've killed him already. And he goes, no, I think you should hear this. Listen. Samael, son of Nergal, Scion of the Darkness, Hound of Resurrection, and then Hellboy sort of doesn't...
He stops in his tracks.
He does a double take. Yeah, he stops in his tracks and he goes, sorry, could you say that again?
Or he says, I don't like the sound of that.
Yeah, that's right. Like you see, no, I don't like... He goes, could I hear that again? What? Hound of Resurrection? He goes, nah, I don't like that. And he turns around and the body's gone.
Yeah.
And then he goes, cut to the end, how do I kill it? And then he goes, doesn't say.
Yeah.
Great little scene.
Yeah, that was very good. So they go back to base. He gets a pile of wheat. He's being fed. Hellboy's being fed a huge amount of food all the time.
Yep.
We got one scene where he gets pancakes, which I have to guess is a
must be a
nod to
reference to the pancakes
story.
Yeah, it is. 100%.
But as he's being treated for his wounds from the fight, they discover that the thing has laid some eggs in his arm. So like, okay,
it's Abe that's doing the treating. So.
Yeah.
Again.
And they're like, were you ever apart from this thing in the subway? He's like, yeah, there was a point where we were separated. And he's like, okay, we got to search the subway in case there are eggs. So now we get the next big set sequence where they go down to the subway and they find all these eggs, and there's a whole bunch of these Samaels now running around there. Because every time they die, you get two.
So Samael, there's two specifically. And they've laid a big, because it's died once so far.
Right.
Hellboy electrocutes it with the third rail of the New York subway.
Yes.
Or the New Jersey subway or whatever. And they go, for some reason, Samael has gone back to Rasputin's base. So Rasputin has a base in the subways, like Lex Luthor.
Yes.
In Superman 1978. Samael has gone there and laid all these eggs there, and it's just sort of swimming around there.
In an old reservoir or something, yeah.
And Cronin, we know it's Rasputin's base because in a deleted scene we see him interacting with Ilsa and Cronin there, putting fake eyes in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He has no eyes in the director's cut. Kind of a good cut that maybe didn't need to go back in. Because it doesn't do any... It's really kind of silly.
Right, yeah.
It's like Looney Tunes, his kind of like very clean white fake eyes that he puts in. Anyway, yeah, so... And the purpose of this seems to be to lure... Because, as you said, there's a big set piece. Abe is trying to collect all the eggs. He's attacked by Samael. Samael kills a bunch of Hellboy's comrades. So does Cronin. Cronin, who's there, just hanging around, kills Clay, a character who we've come to like, and with whom Hellboy shares a clear bond. Yeah. Then Cronin... 2
agents are also killed.
Yes, by Samael, yeah. One
Clay might not make it through the night, we're told later. Yeah.
Yeah, I presume. Yeah. But there's a good little scene where one of the agents has this amazing futuristic-looking gun, which he turns on, and we can see, like, bars ramping up, and you think, what is this gun going to do? And then he's just eaten by Samael before he can shoot it, which is a nice touch, I think.
Yeah.
After Cronin kills Clay, he, as you pointed out, winds down his heart and then
allows himself to be captured.
Goes into sort of suspended animation or simulated death. After he very obviously picks up an envelope with 2 scraps of paper in it, which he takes out, looks at, puts back in the envelope, then secretes
I was going to ask about this.
His it secretes in his clothing.
Yeah.
And then he turns his chest off and kills himself.
Yeah.
And the purpose here is this is all being done to lure Hellboy to the final battle.
Is this the first of the 70 movies where the villain allows himself to be captured so he can wreak havoc from the inside? Because shortly after this we get Skyfall, Avengers...
Avengers, with Loki. Yeah.
What's it, Civil War? It just kept... there was a period of time, 10 years, where it just kept happening again and again and again.
Yeah, you're right. And also, this is unnecessary. Cronin just had to do this very thing back in the library.
I think...
Samael...
My thing is so they think he's dead, they take him back to BPRD.
Yeah.
Broom does an autopsy on him, which is one of the creepiest scenes. It's wild. Very scary. And
when he revives is even better.
When he revives is really scary because he's walking around, he's got no lips.
No lips. He's had them removed. He's removed his eyes.
He's addicted to surgery through to some sort of masochistic tendency. He's addicted to surgery. He's got all this stuff. But also scary scene is when he walks down that spiral staircase behind Broom. It's a very scary shot the way Del Toro's framed it.
I love when he's lying on the autopsy table with plastic sheeting on him.
Yeah.
We just see him. Yeah. We know something's up. He breathes out and the sheeting ripples.
Yeah.
Then he stands up. We can't see him.
Yeah, he's still got the sheet on.
We can only see him sort of through the sheeting brilliantly to obscure the true horror. Then we see him walking. He steps on the sheeting, it starts to be pulled down, and then we cut away and we only see him through gaps in sort of frosted glass. Yeah. So we're only getting hints of what he looks like.
It would probably got our rating if we'd seen him.
We do see him in all his glory in a couple, which I think kind of undermines this great teasing segment, but it's good, and maybe even little bit comic-like with the kind of like seeing him through the gaps in the frosted glass. But then he gears up and slowly walks down the stairs.
Okay, so this is what I've been leading up to several times this episode. Rasputin appears at the BPRD. Can he only do it because Cronin is there?
I think so.
So that's another reason he would allow himself to be captured, so that Rasputin could get into the BPRD.
Yep.
And then he kills...
Well, Cronin kills Broom, and it's to get Hellboy to do what they want.
Yes.
They want Hellboy to go to the place that's written on the piece of paper that Cronin took in there. And killing Broom is, I guess, the way to make sure Hellboy goes, because he will want to avenge the death of Broom, to whom he is close.
Yes.
Except, how does Rasputin know Broom and Hellboy are close? How does Rasputin... How does Rasputin know that Cronin would be taken to the BPRD and not another location? How did the dumb animal Samael know to go to the subway? Hellboy was chasing it to go to the subway and then lay eggs, not just because it's his nature to do so, but specifically to lure Hellboy back to Rasputin's lair in the subways so that Cronin could kill one of his buddies and then get taken back to the BPRD with papers in.
You're right.
You don't really question it because you just long for the ride.
Well, actually, that's a perfect word, because when the note was shown, and I've seen this movie 4 times, I was like, what? Where did that note come from?
Yeah.
What's the point of it? Why are they following it? What is that? Yeah, so...
He wants... And also, in the theatrical cut, there's no obvious reason why Hellboy would even want to go... Why Rasputin would even want Hellboy to go to Russia.
Yeah,
which is where this big cemetery is.
Yeah.
You know, in the director's cut, which I saw for the first time, we get a great little sequence, which I think is actually really cool, where we realise that the reason why Rasputin needs Hellboy to go to Russia is because there's an object there, a sacred object. It's the film's equivalent of the Sadohem monster. Mm-hmm. It's a big block of white stone, which is also the Tunguska meteorite, which destroyed like a big chunk of Russian forest in the early 20th century, and is the subject of lots of conspiracy theories that it was an alien spaceship, things like that. So in the world of the Hellboy film, director's cut specifically, the Tunguska event was the dropping of this sacred stone by the Ogdru Jihad, so that their prison could be unlocked by Hellboy.
Right.
And it's too big to move out of Russia.
Yeah.
We get a line even from... So it's sort of like a discount Raiders of the Lost Ark warehouse.
Yeah.
It's like a big warehouse, except it's kind of like a discount version in Russia where it's way smaller, but it's where this nationalist Russian general collects all of these kind of like Soviet-era mystic items, including this white slab. And he says, you'll never get it out of Russia. And it also says, doesn't matter. The person we need is coming here.
Yeah. Before all this, Liz actually came back to the BPRD.
Yes, you're right.
And
this was happening while they were down in the catacombs.
Yeah. Oh, actually, they come out and Hellboy gets a dressing down from Manning for allowing 2 men to be killed, and that's when Liz comes back at that very moment. She arrives back.
Yeah.
We get he's trying to write love letters to her in his room. Best line in the movie, nachos, is in this scene.
Nachos. Well, like when he says, what's a good solid word for need?
Yeah.
And then Maya says, need's a good solid word. He goes, too needy. There's lots of great little lines.
Yeah, and then Meyer says, well, hurry up and eat this stuff because your nachos are coming. And he says, nachos.
Nachos.
Yeah, so they get to this... They go to Russia. We get a scene that seems to be lifted from the corpse where Hellboy actually finds a corpse. He uses this magical device to detect a corpse that will talk to him.
Yeah. First of all, he has a compass that'll show him come on, find me a talker. That's all we need.
Yeah.
He's magic.
Yeah.
Then he animates.
And that's actually in the comics. He's always carrying a ton in his pouch. He's got a ton of relics and like magical bits that will help him and stuff.
You know what? You remember when they're arriving at the library in that garbage truck, in that lorry, and we see the inside of it? There's all these animals around. It's like, what's this? You have to look closely, and I didn't get this until I listened to the director's commentary. They're like black cockerels, which are used in like magic spells and stuff. It's their equipment for doing magic.
Right.
I'm just wondering why is it like a barn inside this?
Yeah. Right. So they get to the...
Sorry. The corpse guy. It's voiced by Guillermo del Toro.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Had no idea, but he's speaking like...
He's just Russian, but...
Yeah.
He's barely intelligible.
Yeah. Okay, so they use the corpse to lead them to this...
This is a real cemetery, incidentally, where they're shooting.
Okay.
A cemetery in Prague.
Okay. It leads them to this big building, which is very Indiana Jones. Like, there's all these, like, traps and, like, gigantic... I'm like, why is all this stuff here exactly?
It's
what is this
designed
place?
to split them all up from one another.
Yeah, it's... I don't know.
It's a bit much. And then big swinging pendulum that knocks the bridge down.
Yes.
Forces them to...
Why would you set that up? Why would a designer of this? What were they thinking?
Who built it? It's enormous too. And how does Rasputin control it?
Yes.
Does he have a big control panel?
Yeah.
Is he flicking switches?
Yeah. There's fights with there's tons of these frog beasts, the semi-elves down there.
Yep.
And Liz absolutely obliterates them. She ignites. She has to get slapped by John Myers to activate. She needs to be angry, I guess. Yep. And she ignites. Manning and Hellboy have been kind of antagonizing each other the whole movie. Are now finally get along when
they bond over killing him. They bond over killing Cronin.
Yeah.
Now, why does Cronin attack Hellboy here?
Just because
Cronin's
he's
just chilling.
Bad guy.
Yeah, exactly. So remember, this is Rasputin's master plan is to lure Hellboy here.
Yeah.
So that he can use him to activate the...
Oh, I guess he doesn't want to give up the... Oh, you're right. Just leave Cronin out of the way somewhere.
Cronen's
Maybe
just
he's defending himself.
Cronen's just listening to a...
He's listening to music.
He's listening to music.
A record.
And then they walk in and he just attacks them.
Yeah.
It's like, why did he attack them?
Right.
He should have just got out of the way.
Let's keep up the act, I guess.
Yeah. And then Hellboy kills him by dropping a big cog on his head.
Yes.
He says, "That's it for you."
Yes.
Straight out of the comic. He says that a lot in the comic. Pinhead.
Okay, so he gets to Rasputin at some stage, but Rasputin has captured Liz, or he captures Liz here.
Everyone faints in the aftermath of Liz's big detonation.
Yeah.
Hellboy wakes up in a stocks, which is engraved with his true name.
His true name and some sigils that we can't read. Yeah.
And Myers is chained up, and Liz is unconscious on a slab.
Yeah. And Rasputin absorbs her power, as he did in the comic in some sense.
I don't think that's what he's doing. What he's doing is killing her.
Okay.
He's absorbed. So he threatens, he says to Hellboy, "You're going to unlock this thing for me." And Hellboy's like, "Well, no, I'm not.
By the way, this is straight out of Blade, where the hero is the key to unlock the Death God. Yeah.
It is like Blade. Yeah, so Hellboy is like, "Well, no, I'm not going to do that." He goes, "Well, you better do it or I'll kill Liz." And Hellboy's like, "I still can't do it." And then Rasputin kills her by sucking her soul out, essentially.
Yeah.
And then he says to Hellboy, "The only thing you can do now is open that portal, because opening the portal means you can get her soul back." It's not really very clear. I think the portal is maybe to the other side, and the only way he'll ever see Liz again is if he opens the portal.
Okay.
It's a bit vague.
Yeah.
So he says his name, Anungun Rama.
Okay.
That is what unlocks his powers. His horns regrow, the stalks magically open.
By the way...
Flaming crown appears above his brow.
Yes, that's cool. By the way, Rasputin's coat is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything in this film visually is awesome.
Yeah, but he's going. I was like, how do I get that robe that he's wearing?
Robe. Cronin has about 5 different outfits, and they're all grouse.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. And one of them also has that kind of gold. It's very similar to the one Rasputin's wearing at the end. It's really beautiful. And I was like, I want that. It's like a harness kind of that he's wearing. It's really great.
It's like it's really cool.
Yeah. So so he tries to open the portal. Hellboy puts his arm in.
He starts opening it. He starts undoing the locks by putting his arm inside the...
Myers has gotten free. He was chained up, but he got his arm loose of the shackles, and he trips Elsa.
And he tosses Hellboy the rosary with a crucifix that Broom always carried around. And he tells Hellboy to remember who you are.
Right.
The crucifix burns Hellboy's hand because he's gone full demon, but that's enough to snap him out of his maybe grief or hypnosis that he's started to undergo by going full demon. He breaks off his horns, just like in Wake the Devil.
With his hands,
Then he stabs Rasputin with the horns.
Right.
And the chance is lost. They
needed an eclipse or something.
Yeah, they needed an eclipse. The moon turned into a big fireball. I imagine everyone around the world was wondering what was going on there. The Ogdru Jihad start to come through. They completely unfreeze from their prison, and they're reaching down to the earth with their big tentacles.
Yes.
There's a sky beam. This is a sky beam.
So the Sidoham beast that is on Earth here that Hellboy has to now fight
comes out of Rasputin.
Right.
When he
so
dies.
It was not one of the 7 that reached Earth. It was a thing that was inside.
It's an unrelated thing. Rasputin calls it his master.
Yes.
And he says it's the thing that spoke to him ever since he was a little boy.
Right.
In the
So in the comic, it's the thing that saved him in the river that spoke to him and instructed him to start resurrecting this thing from outer space.
This one he's just always heard it, and it's, I guess, the source of his power.
Okay.
And every now and again we'll have a CGI effect that'll show it moving around under his skin.
That's right, yeah.
And he says that every time he dies, and we know he's died frequently, obviously there's when the historical Rasputin died.
Yeah.
And then he's died again on the island in 44, and then so each time he dies he says a little more of the master comes back with him.
Okay, so that
so it's not one of the dragons, it's not the Ogdru Jihad, it must be a Saruhem equivalent.
Yeah.
That lives in the...
Yes.
It's some sort of Lovecraft.
This is the most Lovecraft scene of the movie, because it's this giant tentacle monster. Yep. Hellboy has to fight it. He has these grenades that he's brought from the beginning. He drops it down its mouth, a bit like Jaws, and blows the thing up.
Yes, it is like Jaws, yeah.
And Liz seems to be dead, and he just whispers in her ear, and she's revived.
It's kind of cool. I mean,
I don't mind it.
Because her death was unnatural. Like, it's not like... Rasputin didn't stab her with a knife or something. He sucked her soul out.
Yeah.
So then Hellboy whispers to her, and she comes back to life.
Yeah.
And Myers asks her, what did you say? And he says, or she says, what did you say? And what he said was, he said, hey, you on the other side, let her go. Because if you don't, I'll cross over for her, and then you'll be sorry.
Yeah.
It's okay. It kind of works.
Yeah. I think that's about...
And that's the end of the film.
That's the end.
And then we get a sort of a mirrored narration from Myers.
Oh, that's right.
Where he mentions what makes a man a man. It's the choices you make.
Yes, that's right. And then we get the closing credits.
Yeah.
And that's it. Okay, we have more trivia?
Oh yeah, I've got, well, not a huge amount, but a bit. Alright, so first of all, how did this film do? Okay, its budget was about 66 million.
Okay.
And it made 99.8 million.
Okay.
Both domestically and internationally, so within the US and overseas, which I think constitutes a success. Not a huge success, but it was pretty successful.
But what were the, promotion, the publicity numbers? Because that's always a funny thing. Okay.
Just the note. But
it's usually the same as the budget.
It didn't have a massive promotional budget.
Okay.
I know that because if you believe Mignola... Oh, sorry, not Mignola. Del Toro apparently said that he alienated the producers because they had certain demands that they wouldn't buckle to.
Okay.
So to talk about that, yes, this film had a troubled production, or rather a troubled pre-production.
Okay.
It had trouble getting made in the pre-MCU era. In the pre-MCU era, studios don't like comics.
Yeah.
They don't like comic adaptations. They don't like superheroes.
Yeah.
They also don't like the name,
Yeah.
Hellboy. They didn't particularly like the script.
Okay.
And they didn't like Ron Perlman.
Huh.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine now, obviously, but this is still early days, I guess. According to Del Toro, they could have filmed as early as 1998, but studios kept turning him down and were really cagey because of the stigma associated with superhero and comic books adaptations, which hadn't done well, except
But
for
we've got
Batman.
X-Men and Spider-Man movies happening at this stage.
Yes, and I imagine that probably had a role as well,
right,
in
okay.
eventually. And
Positive,
also Blade
yeah.
2 is the big thing, apparently,
Yeah, right.
which preceded this. Blade 2 is a big success.
Okay.
Del Toro directed it.
Yeah.
Then people are signing up. However, not without caveats, Universal allegedly didn't want Ron Perlman. Like, who is this guy?
Right, okay.
Both...
He actually hasn't done a lot of theatrical features,
No.
even at this stage.
No, he does a lot of work on... He's very
TV.
kind of like accomplished TV actor.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason. So, I couldn't find a hard source for this, but allegedly, Mignola and Del Toro challenged one another to write down their first choice to play Hellboy.
I heard this story
on
too
a napkin.
somewhere. Okay.
Then they exchanged napkins, and they've both written Ron Perlman.
But, okay, that's interesting because it's surprising from Mignola. Del Toro had worked with Perlman
He'd worked with him before.
twice before.
And also, he thought he could pull off acting in heavy makeup.
Yeah, right.
Because Perlman had been in a TV series called Beauty and the
Beauty and
Beast.
the Beast, of course, yeah.
Where he
with,
played...
Sarah Connor.
Yeah, and which incidentally was, I think, maybe co-created and written a lot by George R.R. Martin.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
He was also in his first movie is Quest for Fire, in which he was done up as a Neanderthal.
Yeah. And Perlman, one of the reasons Perlman took the role was because he was excited to play a Beauty and Beast-esque character
Right,
again, because it was something he knew. He'd be in a bunch of heavy makeup interacting with a beautiful young woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Universal didn't want Perlman. They wanted Vin Diesel.
Whoa! What a stinker that would have been.
Oh, man. Not only...
2004. Oh, yeah.
And
So
they
it's a few
also
years after Fast and Furious and Pitch Black.
And they also offered it to Jeremy Renner, who played Hawkeye in the MCU
But
movies.
what had Jeremy Renner done in 2004?
Exactly, I don't know. I don't know, but he turned it down, apparently because he thought he was... Ironically, because I think he thought he was too good for it.
Wow. Okay.
Which is hilarious in the context of his subsequent career.
Yeah. Oh, he was in the Hurt Locker?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, what I mean is we associate him now as Hawkeye.
Yes.
Not only this, but the executives, I haven't found a hard source for this, but allegedly wanted Hellboy to be like the Hulk, where he would turn into a demon when he got angry.
Wow.
So
Okay.
can you imagine Vin Diesel Like, regular guy most of the time, but you like
Suddenly
me when
hulking
I'm
out.
angry. And then turning
right.
into a Hellboy when he got mad. And as you can imagine, Mignola and
Yeah.
Del Toro were just horrified. Just horrified at this concept. And it might have cost them funding,
Right.
apparently.
Right.
My only other thing that I want to mention is that Del Toro wrote the script for this film, but he wrote it in collaboration with a guy called Peter Briggs, who is a script writer and doctor from the UK. Script doctor from the UK. He's most well known for Hellboy, but aside from that...
But he's only got story credit. He doesn't have screenplay credit on this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. He just sort of helped, sure. So, aside from this, he's most famous for writing the original screenplay for Alien vs. Predator.
Huh.
An original screenplay, mind you, not the one that was eventually shot.
yeah.
He wrote it in 1991 and sold it to 20th Century Fox that year,
Huh.
where it languished in development hell for almost 15 years before the Alien vs. Predator film was made,
Right.
around the same time as Hellboy, with a completely different script.
Yeah.
So the script was long gone by that point.
When did
This-
the Dark Horse Alien vs. Predator comic book come out?
Before this.
Before 91.
So he,
Okay.
I think so, yeah. So he's adapted, he's based this screenplay off the comic, I'm sure. I'm
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
And this is one of those infamous scripts that everyone says is genius and laments that it never got made.
Okay.
So it's this urban legend that Alien vs. Predator actually would have been a really great film if they'd just gone with Peter Briggs's script.
Huh, okay. The reluctance to make Hellboy is really interesting considering the David Harbour one and the one that's coming out this year, where it just seems like, here's a comic book thing. It's exactly what this podcast is about, right?
It's a new
like,
landscape
here,
now.
we gotta, this is a brand name that we own. We better make a ton of these,
Well-
even if they don't make any money and they're crap.
Well, part of it is that Hellboy's not well known in 2004.
Yeah, of course.
No one's heard of Hellboy.
Yeah, of course.
Whereas, of course, everyone knows Hellboy now
Yeah.
because of the Ron Perlman films.
Yeah.
But, yeah, nobody knew Hellboy. So they were cagey about it. Also, as I said, they're cagey about the name. When this was released, and it didn't help that it was released at the same time, or around the same time as Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ.
Okay.
Quite a bunch of theatres apparently just refused to screen it.
Wow.
And according to Del Toro in the 2019 director's commentary, which I didn't listen to but is cited a lot on the Wikipedia page, it was marketed in some theatres in the American South as Hello Boy.
Really? Wow, that is crazy.
Again, the only source for that is Del Toro himself in the director's commentary for the 2019 re-release. So take that with a grain of salt. Yeah. But otherwise, yeah. Shall we? I think that's just about it for trivia.
Okay.
Shall we talk about our
Ratings?
ratings? Yeah.
Okay, the comics.
Fantastic.
Easy.
They're the greatest comics ever.
Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah, I absolutely love them too, and they're just so easy to look at. I wish Mignola would get back to drawing comics instead of just writing them, but we have a huge body of work that he has drawn that's just astonishing. It's just so that they're so atmospheric and fun, and this movie is fun too, and just spooky. That's a real spook fest, these comics.
Yeah. They're great.
Yeah. They're
Some
kind of
of
a
them
perfect mix of Jack Kirby superheroics and spookiness, and
Yeah.
it's just really interesting the way it's turned into this big epic thing.
And there's nothing else much really like it
No, that's true.
as well.
Exactly.
It's very unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, read them. The film.
Oh, big yay! So
It's a big yay for me
times,
too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big yay. I love everything about it. Well, I love not everything about it, but I do really, really like this film.
Yeah.
A lot. Ron Perlman's performance is so good.
Yeah.
Doug Jones is great.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, he's not doing the voice, but
Yeah.
he's just amazing.
Yeah. Selma
in that
Blair.
suit.
Everybody's really good in it.
The performances are... John Hurt is, of course, so good.
Yeah.
Fantastic actor.
And it's
It's-
just a visual feast.
Yes. Yes. It's visually really good.
Yeah. It's just jam packed.
It's
And
got-
it's fun. It's so fun.
It really captures the pulp. It's fun. It really captures that fun pulp sensibility that I really like about the comics,
Yeah.
which I suppose brings us to adaptation. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I used to be iffy on it as an adaptation because of the changes to Hellboy's personality. Looking back now, and on this viewing, it's a yay for me. I think it's weird that he is a teenager that's grounded, that's stuck in the B period. I think that aspect of it is odd. But as you said, that's probably executive pressure saying, how can he exist in this world and people aren't, it's not like common knowledge. Whereas when you get to that, what was that? There was one of those Thor or Doctor Strange movies where they're just walking out on the street and people are asking for their autographs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, if we could have gotten to that stage with Hellboy, it would have been closer. But that's one kind of thing that's off about it, but otherwise
it's too early.
It's,
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some things about it that I don't like, and I think we can subscribe to either executive pressure or just lack of confidence in the audience.
Yes.
Being okay with this level of kind of like foreknowledge about comic book worlds, supernatural worlds, that genre. It's very different now where everyone's absorbed the MCU movies. Yeah. You can make a film now. You don't have to do all this groundwork explaining what a superhero is. You don't have to do all that, but there isn't that confidence in the media landscape, in consumers in 2004. So they were pressured to, or they just felt like they had to have. See, I think Myers is a weak thing in the film. Yeah. Although it's hard to see how.
I do wonder, considering how epic the scope that Mike Mignola was looking at, how do they possibly think they could do it in movies? I feel like it's all of Hellboy's origins. We don't actually get any sense of his origin from hell or his father or mother, or any of that kind of stuff in the movie. And I'm like, you could make. Are you planning to make 10 of these movies? What are you thinking? There's no way you can do it. It was maybe not overly ambitious, but maybe the wrong project to look at if you're trying to only make one movie of a thing, because there's too much going on in the scope of it.
Yeah, I suppose I don't really like Myers. I think kind of the action. I'm not sure if Del Toro is a really great action director.
I think the CG is part of the problem there.
Big part of it. But there'll be bits where like Cronin is just kind of doing gymnastics, and people will just be standing awkwardly waiting for him to finish.
Right. Yeah.
It's just little things like that. There's also the scene with Jeffrey Tambor, like Cronin slashes him, and he has time to just fall on the ground awkwardly and sort of yell at him, "Hey, what's the matter with you?"
Right. I actually thought in that moment, oh, he dies in this scene. Like, I didn't remember.
Like, he should have died. Because Cronin should have just stabbed him right away.
Cronin is too good. Like, there's no way this guy should have survived that.
In the subway fight, there's some shots where it's very obviously a guy in a rubber suit. Just got a kind of swinging, big, extended rubbery arms around.
Yeah.
The audience can't see me, but I'm just flailing my arms around bonelessly. Yeah. But this... Oh, I'm back on talking about the film. I was talking about the adaptation, sorry. Yeah. But as I said, so we've got... I feel like it had to tick a lot of boxes.
But in terms of the action, I mean, we did get those Jack Kirby jumps through the air. Yeah, so it's kind of... Sometimes it's there, sometimes
when it's going for the comic aesthetic... Yeah. It's great. I think this is a film where we can see the comic scenes or comic visuals being enacted on the screen in terms of the colour, in terms of the beautiful backgrounds that Mignola likes to put in his set pieces, and in terms of some of the ways in which some of the action, like the jumping around, is shot, and the colours. I think some story elements are really good. I think beefing up Professor Broom, like, he's barely in the comic.
That's right, he dies on page 5 or whatever.
Yeah, we don't know a thing about him, and he's a bit feckless, really. He's just some guy that's hypnotised. Yeah. He's not Hellboy's loving... interesting this important relationship as a father figure, as a competing father figure between Broom and Rasputin. Simplifying the origin, another great decision, having it all on that one island. Things like Hellboy's gun, the Samaritan, and I've already mentioned that I like...
His gun came from the Torch of Liberty in the comic. It was a gift from the Torch of Liberty. Yeah. By the way, I have touched that actual gun at Weta Workshop in New Zealand. Yeah, when you go on the tour, they let you handle it.
I want to touch the gun.
I don't know if there's more than one, because it actually opens up and there's like ammo that goes in, so maybe they built 2 or something.
I'm sure they...
But I think none of the effects were done by Weta. Weta only built the gun. That was the one request they got from Del Toro, was to build the guns.
Excellent piece of trivia there. Yeah. I also, as I said, like the what they did with the kind of like competing characters of Hellboy and Abe.
Yes.
I know that you're not as thrilled about it as I am, but I thought it was a really good change.
Well, I think the change with Liz, like putting Liz more front and center, was definitely...
giving her a personality.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, so I think this is a very successful adaptation.
Okay, please like, subscribe, rate,
And
review.
review.
Please visit us on Facebook. Please join our Patreon. We need the patrons. I think that's all of it.
I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
And next week,
Next week we're going to do Hellboy 2, The Golden Army.
we sure are.
Was not based on any specific Hellboy comic. Apparently the story was original by Mignola and Del Toro. We'll know when we see the credits and do the trivia for next week. But some of it was apparently based a little bit on the Conqueror Worm and Wild Hunt?
Wild Hunt, yeah.
So we'll do those two. We'll read those for next week. Conqueror Worm, Wild Hunt, and maybe Pancakes as well, if I can figure out which collection.
Fantastic.
All right.
Well, it's a single page. You can probably just do a Google image search.
Yes.
And on that note, see you next week.
Okay.